I'd like to call our meeting to order. If you'd all please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Saunders.
Here.
Alderwoman Manister.
Here.
Alderman Leahy.
Here.
Alderman Toohey.
Here.
Alderman Kramer.
Present.
Alderman Robertson.
Here.
Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Harper.
Here.
And Mayor Kelly.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda for the regular Board of Alderman meeting for October 1st, 2012. Any changes? Alderwoman Saunders.
I have a question. I had asked Bulla why the Chris Seemayer topic was not on the agenda. We had slated it for the next meeting.
Right, we do not have a full board here tonight.
And how is that determined when something, like whether a board member is present, whether we go forward, since we have a quorum? I mean, it seems subjective to me. And
Also, we have not completed the additional research that staff was asked to do.
Okay.
So that will be finished in time for the next meeting.
And I think given the topic is important that the aldermen that were present when some of these things were discussed before be present there for that meeting so that they can give their input.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, do you know what I mean? Because
No,
that
that's
can
fine.
be fairly subjective. I mean, if I weren't here, would we maybe go ahead with that meeting? Do you know what I mean? And so I think that needs to, and I wasn't told that you had additional research. You did just tell me that Alderman Nguyen wasn't going to be here, and I know he wasn't at the public safety, and we went ahead with that meeting without his presence. And
Ideally, if our server hadn't been down since Thursday afternoon, that would have been in my weekly report that you all get on Friday, because
Okay.
that is in there. So
Thank you.
you would have known prior tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the agenda as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
And second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All aboard, motion carries. Consideration approval of the minutes from the Board of Alderman meeting, the regular Board of Alderman meeting from August 20th, 2012.
Give me a second.
I have a,
Alderwoman Manister.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify a statement. It's on page 3, line 18 lines down, where it says Alderman Manister stated her confusion. It seemed to her that there was a consensus at the Public Works meeting to combine City Hall. I just want to clarify that statement because it sounds as if the Public Works Committee members were in agreement to combine City Hall with the Rec Center, and that wasn't the case. So really, I mean, I can clarify. My confusion was really just directed at Alderman Robertson's previous statements that he was referring to both a gymnasium and a fitness center. At the Public Works meeting, I'd asked him if, when he uses the term gym, if he meant gymnasium or a fitness center, and he replied a gymnasium. So how it should read is Alderman Manister stated her confusion. It seemed to her that there was a consensus at the Public Works meeting to utilize Alderman Leahy's suggestion of a simple survey to use the consultant to assist the survey questions at a minimum cost, and that the gym mentioned was a gymnasium and not a fitness center. And I have it written down if you guys
That'd be fine.
you
Okay.
guys need this. I know it's kind of involved, but
And I only had one change, but I emailed it to Octavia not till about 5 o'clock or so. Is that okay? Today?
Well, just so you understand, let's make sure everybody's on the same board with how minutes need to be presented and changed.
Okay.
Okay. If minutes are taken by staff at either a subcommittee meeting or here at the Board of Aldermen, any changes to those minutes, they need to be developed by staff, and then they need to be brought to that committee or brought here to the Board of Aldermen, and any changes need to be made here at this level. Because otherwise, the staff could develop minutes and people could just submit changes that maybe somebody just wants to change something and that's not really what they said, but the rest of the board doesn't know that they made that change. So you really need to make changes either at the committee level or here at the Board of Alderman level, at least submit them like in writing or whatever, or to clarify. So.
Okay, I
Okay.
apologize. I misunderstood from the last Board of Alderman meeting. I thought to speed up the process, you told me to email, and so I misunderstood.
I think that's what I was trying to say
misunderstood.
at the last meeting was the fact that they needed to be done
Okay.
at the meeting.
Well,
and
mine
then-
was a
okay.
simple
Okay.
change, page 1, under approval of agenda, and it's the 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, let me see, because I emailed it. I thought I was doing the right thing. Now, figures I can't find it, because I don't have it circled here. I don't see it now. I'm sorry, but anyway, the word complained, I wanted changed to stated. That was the, what I had requested of,
Sixth
Octavia.
line?
is
Is
that,
it sixth line?
Yes.
Alderwoman Saunders?
Dead center in the
Complaint.
6th line. Alderman Saunders complained that Alderman
thank
Kramer.
What
you.
should it be changed to?
just stated.
Stated, okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other changes? Okay. Can I have a, do we already have a motion?
No.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved, Your Honor.
And second?
Second.
Motion was made by Alderman Leahy, second by Alderwoman Saunders. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Now, that's the August 20th.
That's August 20th, right.
Thank you.
Motion to approve the special meeting from September 10th, 2012. Any changes or additions?
Okay, now.
I have one.
Yes, Alderwoman Manster?
Just on page 5, the resident's name, it says Chris Kobler. It's Kobler, Kobler. It's just a name correction, that's all.
Okay. Any other changes? Motion, please.
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry, Alderman Leahy.
If I may, yeah. The page 16, if I can get to that one. All right. I would like to confirm with the board, under new business, paragraphs 2 and 3. Do they read the way the board would like it to read?
That's one that I had emailed to Octavia too, and I had said that where it begins, the second paragraph, Alderman Saunders also made a motion, pursue civil action against Chris C. Mayer. A motion was seconded by Alderman Toohey. I said that we should add that this motion was rescinded by Alderwoman Saunders, and the second was rescinded by Alderman Toohey.
Okay,
And
that
then
was,
we went
that
on
is
with the
correct.
new motion, the following. So we would just add that this motion was rescinded by Alderwoman Saunders, and the second was rescinded by Alderman Toohey.
Yes, you add that as actually line 3 or paragraph 3, before a discussion was, well, no, should be after the discussion was held.
Right. Closed session,
Okay.
then add that sentence, and then go into Alderwoman Saunders made a motion to consider pursuing.
All right.
Okay,
Now, it is my
You have that?
understanding, wait a minute.
I do.
okay.
I have it.
It is my understanding that the motion was to bring this action to the agenda for the next meeting. The way it reads, this says the board's agreeing to take action to something. We've agreed to put it on the agenda for discussion. And that's big time difference than what's here.
Well, it says
The
to
second one
consider
is correct.
pursuing civil action. This allows the topic to be placed on the next agenda. That's not,
Okay.
Right.
But is everybody in agreement that that's as far as we've taken, is to put it on the agenda, that we're not taking action at this point?
Right.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. Because
Okay.
when I read it, I didn't read it that way.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Motion to approve the minutes from September the 10th special meeting as submitted. With
No, as amended. Okay.
With the one correction of the resident's last name being corrected.
Well, and
the rescission.
rescinding of
I'm
the
sorry,
first motion.
Okay.
So as amended.
As amended, fully as amended, all right.
And second?
Seconded.
Motion was made by Alderman Leahy, second by Alderman Toohey. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next item, item 5, public hearing. At this time, I'd like to reopen the public hearing that was a carryover from our last Board of Alderman meeting with respect to the tax rate. I think, were there any changes to the numbers once we got our final assessments from
The
the county?
estimated revenues changed, but the tax rates stay the same.
Okay. So for the, do you want to go ahead and read the tax rates for what is proposed?
Right. The tax rate for general fund residential remains at 0. Commercial tax rate is .1960. Personal tax rate is .2070. Estimated revenue is $260,068. The tax rate for the library fund is .2000. Commercial tax rate is .2160. Personal tax rate is .2290, and the estimated revenue is $569.35. The pension fund tax rate is .3650. The commercial tax rate is .4110. Personal tax rate is .3850. Estimated revenue is $1,044,833,000. And for the debt service, across the board, it is 0.
Okay. All right, so at this time, I'd like to open up to the public. If anyone would like to make any comments with respect to the proposed tax rates, please come forward and give us your name and address. Okay. Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Next item on the agenda, presentation of their presentation.
Excuse me, Alderman.
Yes,
I mean,
I'm sorry.
Your Honor, sorry.
That's right.
Do I have still a clarification to make about the tax rates? Do I do
Sure.
that when we're doing the bills? Would that be the more
You
appropriate
can go ahead and do it now,
spot?
that's fine.
Well, I mean, I can, I just didn't know the appropriate place.
Okay, that's fine. We can do it when we get to the bills.
Okay, thank you.
It might be a little bit clearer that way. Okay.
you.
I'm sorry, we're going to have a presentation of the annual audit. And Gina, I believe you're first on the agenda. And for the audience that haven't met Gina before, Gina Jarvis is the new finance officer for the city of Brentwood. And so this is your real first presentation to us. So.
All right.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Kelly and members of the Board of Alderman. I'm pleased to present to you the city's 2011 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And this is the document. This CAFR, it's also known as a CAFR. This CAFR is presented to the Honorable Mayor, Board of Aldermen, and citizens of Brentwood, Missouri from the city administrator and the finance director via the letter of transmittal in the introductory section of the document. This report is prepared annually to document the city's financial position at the end of each fiscal year. In this report, you'll find a lot of useful information, but most importantly, it contains the city's audited financial statements and the independent auditor's report. Tammy Alsop from Hauschel Bloom & Company will speak to you in a moment about the results of our annual audit in 2011. As I mentioned earlier, this CAFR reflects the city's audited financial statements and is the official permanent record for the city for the year ended December 31st, 2011. We've published the document on the city's website, as you'll find most municipalities do that around the country. The CAFR differs from the budget document in that the budget document is reflective of the budget that is adopted by the Board of Alderman. The budget document is also an official permanent record of the city and reflects the spending plan for the city as recommended by management and adopted by the board. If you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer those with respect to the CAFR. And otherwise, I can turn it over to Tammy and she'll talk a little bit about the audit itself.
Okay, any questions of Gina? Okay, thanks, Gina.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Gina. My name's Tammy Alsop. I'm the partner on the City of Brentwood's audit. I'm very happy to be here. I'm sure you guys you're probably getting tired of seeing me. I've seen everybody here. This is the third time. Sorry about that. I'll make this brief. On the audited financial statements, you'll notice that on the table of contents, your audit report is broken down into 3 sections. You have the introductory section, which includes the letter of transmittal, the principal officials, the prior year's certificate of achievement, and then the organizational chart. Section 2 is the financial section, sorry about that, which includes our independent auditor's report, the management discussion and analysis, and then the basic financial statements and the notes to the financial statements. In Section 3 is the statistical section. That gives you approximately 10 years of financial information in the back, and that's really some useful information if you ever get a chance to look at that. It is really neat information if you have a chance to go over that. First of all, I'll go to our opinion letter, and that's the first page in the Section 2 of the financial information. It's our independent auditor's report. And you'll notice in the third paragraph of that report, the city received an unqualified opinion, which is the highest form of opinion that a city can receive on their financial statements. It said, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information as of December 31st, 2011, and the respective changes in financial position thereof for the year then ended in conformity with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. So that's a very good opinion, and that's always the opinion that the city likes to strive for. On page 4 starts the management discussion analysis. If you just want a short synopsis of what's in these financial statements, you would look at the management's discussion analysis, and that really goes from page 4 to page 11. The management discussion analysis looks at the government-wide basis, which is the basis of accounting if the city was a for-profit entity. So it has all the infrastructure of the city and all the debt of the city, even the TIF debt of the city, even though it's not, the development is not owned by the city, but the debt is still required to be on the statements. And then you have the regular governmental funds, which is what you're used to looking at, and it includes on the modified accrual basis of accounting. So that's also in here. Then you have the notes, and then you have the budget to actual statements also in the back. So you'll notice that the government-wide basis, the total liabilities exceeded the assets by $17 million. I said that right, didn't I? Total liabilities exceeded the assets. Okay, sorry. By $17 million. The governmental activities had unrestricted net assets of a negative $35,000. Or excuse me, not 35,000. 35 million. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I've really done this before. I'm sorry. Sorry. It's been a long day. And this negative amount is due to the $37 million of TIF bonds that are actually outstanding for its development, not owned by the city.
Tammy, could I,
Sure.
just as a point
Sure.
of clarification, and I think it's important for the audience to understand that those record-keeping regulations changed within about the last 10 years or so, where the cities had to start carrying the TIF as an obligation is that correct, right?
That's on
Prior to that, we didn't actually do that. And I think the other reason, and correct me if I'm saying this right or wrong, but not only do we carry them on here and that we don't own the developments, but they're not an obligation to the city as well, in that it's an obligation of the tax revenue collected from that specific project for that period of time.
That's correct.
Right.
GASB 34 actually came into effect 9 years ago for the city. So, and GASB 34 is what actually made everything go onto the government-wide statement, such as the infrastructure and all the debt. But that is not debt that is owned by the city.
Right.
But as you said, the tax increment revenues that the city receives is used to pay off that debt.
Right.
So it's nothing that the city actually has to pay from its general money that it receives. Okay, if that's.
Yep.
Does that make
Do you know
sense?
what that net asset number would be if you factored out the TIF? Or is that shown
Yeah.
somewhere if it didn't have the?
It'd be a positive $2 million.
Just a positive 2 million is the net assets?
Yeah, if you look at the under financial highlights, the second paragraph there, it says the governmental activities had unrestricted net assets of 35 million, a negative 35 million on page 4.
Oh, I'm
Are you
sorry.
looking on page
Okay.
4 with me?
Okay.
Okay. And this negative amount is due to tax increment bonds totaling $37 million. So if you take the 37 million minus the 35 million, you'd have a positive, and I'm just 2 million. I mean, I'm just rounding for you. So does that make sense to you? Okay. Yeah. But now too, there would be some cash that would offset that because the cash from the TIF is in there also. So we would have to kind of take that out too.
Right, okay.
But let's see. So at the close of the current year, the city's governmental funds reported ending fund balance of $10 $11 million, a decrease of $1 million. And that's what the city is used to seeing. Of this amount, 388,000 or 4% is unassigned funds available to spending at the city's discretion. And so the unassigned fund balance for the general fund is $491,000 or 4% of the general fund expenditures. And then your total debt decreased by approximately $4 million or 8%, and that's very good. As you'll notice, that's why you don't actually have a debt service tax levy anymore, because in 2012 you're gonna pay off those GO bonds. So, yay! So we don't have that debt anymore. So that's good, and that's why you don't have that tax levy for that. So that's very good. Let's see, if you look on page 7, you can really see the differences between the years of the current assets. And this is, again, on the government-wide basis. So you have $35 million in 2010 in total assets, and you have $34 million in total assets for 2011. And again, this decrease is due to the city being able to pay off their TIF bonds. That's why this cash also goes down, and that's why the long-term debt outstanding went down $4 million. You're paying off that debt. So that's very good. Then on page 8, the total revenues on the government-wide basis, again, was $22.9 million in 2011. In 2010, it was $22.7 million. There was just a few changes in that. The taxes decreased because of the still dealing with the economy. So, I mean, they're still fluctuating on us a little bit. And then the expenses went from $19.2 million up to $20 million. And this had to do, if you look at municipal operating, it actually went up $1.4 million. And I actually looked into this a little bit more. I know the Ways and Means Committee, we were talking about this. And when I was looking at this has a lot to do with the the Brentwood Eager Road TIF. It's $700,000 more than the municipal operating expenses for 2011 were $700,000 more than 2010. And that's because of what's going on with those bonds, with the banks charging fees, the attorneys there's fees in there for the attorneys. There's all kinds of stuff in there. So, and hopefully we can refund those bonds soon and get it to where it's in a good shape so we can get those fees out of there and start paying down those bonds. So, but that was the
fees
big
continue.
Excuse me.
Those fees continue to increase until we get this settled.
So the bank and the developer settle, yeah.
Right. But that's not coming out of city funds.
Correct.
That is still coming out of
The Eager
the
Road.
TIF funds, the tax increment revenue. So, I mean, it's not coming out of general revenue money at all.
Right.
Okay.
And I
So-
think that's the important distinction, I guess, maybe to take it to the next level, that if a project was to go completely belly up, it's not an obligation of the city to pay those bonds.
Right.
Right. It goes away. And-
Right.
Right. So.
But because those fees are in this government-wide, I wanted to make sure that we talked about it a little bit because it was a huge difference. And then there was some other things that we talked about. It was the unemployment fees went up, the health insurance fees went up, of course, and then the city's legal fees went up. But, I mean, so that's just some small things that went up compared to the $700,000 that actually changed. So I'm not going to go.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. So that gets accounted for in the municipal operating expense, even though it will be paid out of the TIF? That's not...
Right, because we have to combine all those revenues and all the expenditures and everything and all the cash from the TIF funds that we actually have, and I'm saying we, they're in the city's name at the bank.
Okay.
So the activity that goes through those accounts has to be accounted for in the city's financial statements, and that's how it's actually accounted for. So if you just want to see what's happening in the general fund is by itself in here too. Okay. And the TIF funds are actually separated. They're in the back, and I think they're actually called TIFs on them. Well, no, they're not back in the back. But I think it'll tell you right before, let's see, on page 46, it tells you when you're looking at the debt service funds, what these funds are. And most of them do say, they're because of sources for the tax increment revenue, refunding bonds, principal and interest, or whatever it's going for.
And that's why, too, when, we have our, working on the budget right now and just rounding, our operating budget is going to be around 15 million or so. But when you see in here, in the CAFR, you see 20 million. Well, the taxes and the expenses of those TIFs are built into here, too. So this might make think that we have a $20 million a year budget, which I guess technically we do because the tax laws changed 10 years ago, but it includes all that TIF activity as well, right? So.
Right. And you could budget that, but it's not going to help you any.
Right,
I mean,
right.
It's not going to help the city with any general revenues paying anything from it, because you have to use those pledged revenues for that TIF. You can't use them for anything else.
Right.
Nothing else. So I didn't want to take up a whole lot of time. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask me. We didn't have any problems with the audit. Everything went pretty good. And I do want to thank Gina and Bola for all their help. I know it was a hard year for them also. So I do want to thank them for all their help, because they were a big help to us.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of Tammy? Alderwoman Saunders?
Well, we need to address the process, because at the Ways and Means we found out, I had asked that the organization chart be pulled from these statements because I think that Ways and Means, we all agreed that it was not accurate. And at the Ways and Means meeting, we found out that this report had already been submitted to the GFOA. And so that if we wanted to pull this back, we had to pull all the financials. And I'm trying to understand how this happened, because we were all under the impression that that we actually adopted the audited financials. I think Alderman Kramer spoke to that at the Ways and Means. And so I'm confused on the process, because the same too, then I pulled last year, September 19, 2011 minutes, and it said the audited financial statement for 2009 was sent to the GFOA, and the city received the certificate of achievement. The 2010 audited financial statement will be sent in as well. Now, this is in September, but my understanding is the GFOA, and now this is a voluntary thing so that we get this certificate, but that the deadline is more like July or the end of July.
It's the end of June.
It's the end of June.
Mm-hmm. 6 months.
So how did we, in the past, did you review these in June at Ways and Means? I went back to try to find the minutes, but they were not there. And that's what Alderman Kramer, you mentioned. I listened back at the tape again that, and Alderman Leahy, that we review them in draft form first. No, actually, I take that back. Tammy, it was you that said that you used to present it in June, that you'd always presented the draft to Ways and Means. How did we miss that this year? How did the process fall through the cracks? Or
It wasn't just this year. I don't think Ways and Means has actually seen a draft of the statement for a little while, have they? I mean, they don't normally approve it.
Right.
They approve it after it's
presented once it's completed. I think there is a separation, and maybe this will help clarify the process. There has to be a separation between the staff working with the auditors to develop this report. Okay? There really isn't anything for the Board of Alderman to give input in when this is being developed, because we're not handling the day-to-day operations of the city. That's why you bring in an outside auditor to come in, ask all the questions, and put this document together. It is then presented to Ways and Means before it usually comes to the Board of Aldermen, and then it is accepted. We don't pass this by ordinance. We don't, we just vote to accept the audit as it was submitted. We don't have any input on how this is put together. And so if staff and the auditors were working and had the document together, and again, Tammy, just correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the way I always sort of work, is that, they would get everything they needed to get together in order to submit it so that we could be in this process. But it really didn't take board action to do that. This is something staff does as kind of a, backup to their operations in order to have somebody else overlooking it as well, kind of thing. That we're following those procedures.
Right.
Right.
Right, and if we would like to change that, that's fine. I don't have a problem. There's a lot of committees I meet with before we actually start the audit, and then when we have a draft. And this committee, we really haven't done that, and I'm sorry I did misspeak whenever I was at that meeting, Ways and Means Committee,
Ways and Means.
that we didn't do a draft with that committee.
Okay.
I went back and looked at, and I couldn't find where we actually did a draft with that committee.
Okay.
So
Well, and you can see my confusion because then I'm looking at these minutes and they're in September and they're saying that we're going to submit the report, and yet the report has really actually been submitted already. That's what the minutes from September of 2011 read. The problem I'm having, though, with the organization chart, and I can understand what you're saying, Mayor Kelly, as far as the actual financial statements, but we know we've had an issue with this chart. It was the first topic brought up when we started with the Ways and Means Employee Manual. And so I would have at least thought that would have come before Ways and Means, or at least brought before us, since there has been questions concerning that.
well, I can tell you, whenever we were at last year's Ways and Means Committee, and I know that you're new, and I know some of the other people are new on the Ways and Means Committee, but from what I remember and what notes that we took, and I actually talked to Penny Hill, which is a director on the audit with us, that the Ways and Means Committee did talk about, now this wasn't the org chart that was in the 2010 report.
Right.
They did talk about updating and wanted it a little bit different, that org chart to be a little bit different and update it. And so this is my understanding of when we asked Gina to give us an updated chart, that this is the way that it was understood that how the city government worked.
And now, can I ask Alderman Leahy or one of the people that were involved, I know Alderman Marshall had trouble with it, what was the change that they were referring to that they thought 2010s were not accurate? It wasn't completely this. There was just one or two things out of place. I don't know whether it was where the residents or where the board was. Do you remember what Alderman Marshall?
Mr. Marshall's main concern, if I may, Your Honor,
Mm-hmm.
his main concern was to put the citizens in above everybody, that we all respond to them.
That's what I thought.
And then from there, breaking down and defining what the different committees did. We did some housekeeping, and I believe we removed 2 or 3 committees that were standing, the insurance committee, the loss committee, and one other committee that, under the code, there are supposed to be 4 standing committees, and we had 2 others, and I think we passed an ordinance that removed those 3 committees from the existence to work with, so that you end up with just the 3 committees that we have right now in existence. And then the question is who reports to who to work with? Bola, I'll yield to you if you'd like to explain the documents that you've generated.
Well, I'll make one comment first, and then I'll turn it over,
Okay.
because I think the board, and I think a lot has been made of the organizational chart, and I would tell you, in practicality, it to a certain extent, it doesn't mean that much when you're looking at the city's operation. Again, this is a document. This isn't an ordinance. It's just kind of a picture of how the city is run. And I think the issue that's come into play over the last 6 months or so, or maybe even a year from last year, is that there is a difference between the operational organizational chart of the city and then the legislative organizational chart of the city. And sometimes it's hard for people to combine that, because you have the day-to-day operations and how an organization works, but then we also have the legislative part. And so that's why when different people read the code, they get different interpretations of how the organizational chart should be. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, and I know there's been changes since they've gone back and even produced this one that they think could be changed. And I think you could produce one today and go a couple months from now and change it again. But I would stress any alderman that think that they have a change or would like to work to put an organizational chart together that meets our code, then give that input. That's the one thing that we've lacked through all these discussions. Everyone says it's wrong, but nobody's telling us what they think is wrong about it. And so, without that input, staff is doing their best to try to put something together the way they're interpreting the code, and all they get is it's wrong. And so, I would just encourage anybody that has any input or really, would like to see it change, then we work to have that change.
I can only speak for myself, but I've never said it's wrong, meaning, the old chart was wrong. I know, and that's the whole thing is I don't understand why we changed the chart. And so I would think that when those changes would come forward, the rationale, but I was thinking that the old chart, and to me it appears to be reasonable. It seems to me that that's how we've been conducting business, is according to the old chart. So I had no problems with it, so that's why I haven't brought forward any changes, as you would suggest, because I felt that the old chart accurately reflected the way we were conducting business. And if that's not the case, I just need the rationale, which is what I asked Bulla. Normally when you're going to change something, you support it with facts as to why you're changing it.
Well, when I started in August, there was the conversation, as Tammy alluded to, that the org chart was wrong. When you look at that org chart, it has all the departments reporting to the different committees. From a legislative point, if you look at the code, they do. But when you look at this org chart that was in the 2010 CAFR, it also makes it seem like from a personnel standpoint, all the departments report to the committees. And they're two separate functions. There's the legislative oversight, and when you look at the code and it talks about the description of each committees, it covers that. But when you look at the org chart that was in the 2010 CAFR, it makes it seem that from a personnel standpoint, which means it combined legislative and personnel together. So what we're trying to do in following the direction that I was given last fall is to separate those two functions and to show the reporting structure how it really is on a day-to-day basis in the city. That's all we were trying to do.
Yeah. Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. Appreciate the opportunity to weigh in here. The Ways and Means Committee in the past had certain methodologies, certain ways of doing things. This is my first year. I am fortunate to be the chairman of Ways and Means Committee. Looking forward to at least a handful of enhancements as we go forward. We've got some great people on our team and looking forward to wonderful input. There is a difference and a discrepancy in the organizational chart if you look at it only one way. And as it's been mentioned here this evening, there's another way to look at it. Easiest for me to look at it as you've got the reporting to and you've got control of. There's two different ways. Control is certainly a different item than reporting to. In the new employee handbook draft, we have some further work that's been done. But in the past, the Ways and Means Committee looked at the audit as a third-party comprehensive analysis of our financials. It's important to realize in this particular case that it is a snapshot for the end of 2011. One of the things that has come up on a regular basis since this topic was raised for 2011 is the general fund unrestricted reserves. That number that's reported in the audit was from the end of 2011. That same line item, general fund unrestricted, is different today than it was then. It's important to realize that that number does fluctuate. And in terms of the I guess in terms of the structure and the way things are in the organizational chart, you know, in the past, it never was really studied that closely because we don't technically follow it. Now, as you mentioned to us during the Ways and Means Committee meeting, the requirement is that that chart be as accurate as possible before it is certified and it is approved. So that's when the question came up about timing, when we get the proposal versus when it's actually approved. And that's when the summertime came in versus the time frame that we're in right now. We wondered aloud, was it possible, in terms of the organizational chart, for example, to look at it to make sure it's accurate, maybe make some tweaks or changes. And you, of course, said the time to do that would be earlier and not later. We don't want to really make any tweaks or changes to the audit. It's not really our job. Our job is to receive it from you and accept it. The term in the past that was used quite often was adoption. And I agree the word adopt is probably not proper. It was accepting of the audit as it was presented and understanding all the questions that we have going forward so that everybody's completely knowledgeable. So I think in the future for the Ways and Means Committee to look at this again, I don't think it's going to hurt for us to see it earlier in the year and on something that we do have maybe some input on, the organizational chart, for example. Perhaps we could reform it a little bit if it needs it. But as far as the data goes in the audit, we really don't want, that's us to understand, not to change. So I'm hopeful that our committee will be in agreement that next year we'll get the information earlier and decide if we would like to take a look at something like the organizational chart, but then quickly pass it on to our professionals that we've hired to go through their process before it comes back to us to recommend its acceptance by the full board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tammy, can I ask you, can you address, because that, as Alderman Kramer had mentioned at our Ways and Means meeting, that was a hot button topic, but the 491,000 unassigned reserves, and also the change in that fund balance for this year. Your comments about the negative 700 and...
The fund balance in the general fund did decrease by $700,000, so it went from $1.2 million down to $500,000. And my recommendation was, and normally cities do this, is actually have a target balance, fund balance, that they would want to keep, such as, say, I'll just take a percentage, 15% of expenditures that sometimes they would like to keep in that fund balance. And I think that was one of the recommendations that we had in there, in your recommendations, to actually look at that and maybe see about finding a target that would be good for the city to keep in that fund balance.
And that would be not to have it fluctuate up and down, but to kind of keep a steady balance when we determine that target amount. Is that the goal there?
It's just to kind of make sure that if anything expected comes up, hopefully that 15% of expenditures would take care of that.
Uh-huh. And do you know, is it better to keep it like as a reserve line? Like, or do some cities have a special line for that? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you know, you're dipping into your reserves. It's kind of your, to me, I think of it as a safety net. It's your, kind of your savings account.
Now, if you would take, because of the way the new fund balance is actually described in here, if say the 2012 budget would actually use some of that fund balance, we would actually show that on page 14 as being assigned for subsequent budget reserves. So then that's telling people that you're actually going to take that money that you had, that fund balance, and you're going to use part of that for 2012 fiscal year, because that's how you budgeted it. Does that make sense?
Isn't that, I mean, with when Alderman Kramer refers to it fluctuates, it to me, the way that it's been described, and maybe I haven't understood, but it's just your checking account balance, and naturally it fluctuates up and down based on revenue and expenditures going out. I mean, that seems what I've gotten from listening to Alderman Kramer, but I'm not quite certain. I mean, I'm thinking that we should have a reserve line, do you know what I mean? And we should target it at a minimum
Right, and that's what I'm saying for unassigned fund balance. That's what the new GASB 54 is telling you, that it would be good to have, like I said, maybe 15% of your expenditures
And so hopefully that
keeping in
number
that fund,
won't
that unassigned
fluctuate
fund balance.
other than you increasing it or keeping it steady until an emergency arises.
Right.
Okay. Have we had that recommendation made in the past, or is this new that you're asking us to
The
have?
GASB 54 is new. That came into effect in 2011.
Okay. But I mean, as far as
12.
recommendation to have a safety net or reserves?
I think we've talked about it once in a while, but
Oh, yeah.
I thought you had a
Oh,
safety.
yeah.
But I mean, it really wasn't a huge problem. It didn't seem to be. You know, it seemed like we were doing okay, and then, you know, then all of a sudden we used a lot of the fund balance this year.
Well,
So,
Alderman Lee.
if I may, from where we're at, the 1.2 that we had in there was leftover cash from prior years.
cash and receipts.
We ran into trouble with the one development project. We've incurred additional expenses that we've had to at least cover up front. Is
Right.
that where that 700,000 floats in?
Some of it.
Okay.
Some of it does from the
Thus,
lawsuit.
in order
right.
to make it work, last year's budget, we ended up with revenues projected to be about $17,000 higher than the expected expenditures. We run into the trouble of covering the bills for the one development, and we've pulled in from the reserves to make it work. Thus, we stay balanced. Our trick in the last 10 years is to make sure that our revenues have always just been a little bit higher than what we think we're going to spend to work with, so that we have leftover capital to throw into the reserves later if we don't spend anything to
Right.
go after. Because of last year's legal issues and stuff, we dipped. So we've never presented a budget to the citizens where we knowingly are saying, we do anticipate expending far more than we take in, thus requiring us to go back to the loose cash and say, I need to pull money out of here to get the budget to balance, to work with.
But we have talked,
Constantly of putting money in reserves. The trick is
Oh, yeah.
we don't always come up with that much extra capital.
right.
Do I tax you to put it in a rainy day fund, or do I pay the least amount of taxes possible to cover the city budget?
Right. And I think, you know,
Cut
again,
expenses.
because of
That's,
the position the city's in today, I think that this is something we have talked about, I have talked about with staff in the last year, is that we do want to have a line item in there for some certain amount of reserves to start building up that account to reach whatever level we decide is important. Another big benefit is that when let me get the developments right, the Brentwood Square is paid off. No, then it must be, no, next year is Brentwood Point, the following year is it. So 2014, depending on what we do this year, again, next month, we should be getting another pass-through from Brentwood Square. It should be about as much as we had last year. And if we decide to put all that back in and pay down the bonds or whichever. But right now, as of today, the reserve fund that we'll actually get back when that is paid off will be about $825,000. That money can be used in general revenue. So that already was one of the things that we had planned on and starting to help build up that reserves as we go forward. And so, you know, that'll be one big boost as we go forward. And then plus, the reason we're going to be able to, or we should be able to start allocating funds every year is because of the increases in revenue as these projects are paid off. That's right. And again, Tammy said we've talked about it a few times. I can tell you we've talked about it every year about reserves and the ability, you know, to get to this point where we can actually have that as an item and start building that up, and specifically the general revenue, right? So.
Yeah, I know some of the prior years, there's been a line item, I think they've been talking about, that there was maybe a CD that was sitting in there that they didn't use, and so that was sitting there for a long time, you know, and that was their reserves, and so.
Right. Yep.
And
Alderwoman
I'm happy to hear that, but it's just that same token, I want to make sure that we stay on target, because like after 2009, the Promenade bonds, and we saw, I think you'd said at the last meeting, approximately $2 million additional in revenue, and I would have hoped some of that would have gone to the reserves, do you know what I mean? And it didn't, so I just want to make sure, you know what I mean, that we do have our eyes.
Yeah, actually, it would be a little bit higher than that, but again, when you break it down into funds, the increase in revenue on the general fund from the promenade, the increase in revenue of the city was only about, not only, but about $700,000 because of, again, the way it was structured, and because we were already getting $300,000 before that. But so the general fund was only about $700,000, and then this year, again, anticipating the fact that that would be paid off, you know, that's one of the reasons we were able to, you know, build a new fire department, the police department, and pay for those out of general revenue. And you know, so those are coming out of capital, and when we have had to in the past, we would use general fund for those things too. So yeah, there was an increase, and especially on the other fund balances, it's been great. That's why you're seeing a higher reserve in capital fund and those kinds of things. You know, again, that's why we need to budget that and make sure we are doing that savings every year, right? So, Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. I guess I just wanted to reiterate from my own point of view as a previous Ways and Means Committee member, I have always been a proponent and an advocate for us to have a larger reserve. And my exposure to our Brentwood Forest arrangement has kind of spoiled me in that regard. We are very, very fortunate in Brentwood Forest, and the city has been able to do some nice things, though, along the way. For example, the school has gotten funds along the way that they ordinarily would not have gotten. We've had funds available for some other projects that we ordinarily wouldn't be able to do. And ideally, that general fund reserve, unrestricted reserve balance, is not one that would be volatile and would be a little bit less variable. That's the ideal situation. We found ourselves with some unique situations over the last couple years. And I think that we were going to be anticipating things being better in the future. I think that they will. I'm actually very excited about the future in terms of our revenue, and I'm looking forward to a very comfortable balance in that reserve. Thank you.
Got a question about that.
Yeah, Alderman Tui.
If you set the reserve level, do you do testing all throughout the year to make sure it stays at that level, or how would you know from an audit standpoint that we just didn't fill it up at the balance sheet date?
Normally, you try to look at
Quarterly.
yeah, it's really hard to look at it because, you know, the real estate tax, all that comes in at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you're getting, what, $290,000 is what the revenue is going to be for the general fund for the property tax. Well, you know, that kind of inflates then your revenue for the first quarter, you know, and it kind of looks funny then going forward. But yeah, you want to make sure that you're kind of looking at that and make sure you're meeting that, especially whenever you're looking at budget.
Sure.
So, and I know this was one of the first years that we actually amended the budget, which, yay, I'm happy about.
Right.
We should be looking at that, you know, looking at amending that budget and see really where it is. You know, if you do it quarterly, if you do it semi-annually, however you want to do it.
Right. And then are there guidelines for ever dipping into the fund? And what I would hate to see, I like the idea of a high reserve, but what I hate to see is putting a base layer we're never going to touch, and then we're taxing our residents even more to get the operating revenues. Like, you know what I mean? That you stick a layer you're never going to touch, it's just dead money sitting on our books. And then later we have to tax additionally to get our operating revenues because we're afraid to ever touch that dead money.
Really, they call it like you'd like to have a target balance. So if you want a target balance of like 15%, but that's not anything that's dead set that you have to get it there. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you would look at, you know, how you can raise it throughout the years. You know, that might be in your policy, fund balance policy, of how you might be able to raise it during the years. But I mean, there's no set that says you have to keep 15% in there all the time, forever and ever, and never do anything with it.
Okay. So
That,
so I want to
Alderman
make sure.
Saunders.
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Tui, maybe I don't understand. I don't see that necessarily as dead money. I mean, I know we don't get to put it in, you know, real risky investments and we can't earn a lot of money, but still, if the situation, like for instance this year, had those fees with the promenade or you know, with the Eager Road Associates or something else significant happened, we would have been in the negative. I mean, that way, well, you have that steady account, you have it, and then naturally over the next couple of years we build it up. But I don't see having to increase taxes. I mean, just because we have a base layer there for emergencies. I mean, it'll earn some interest, maybe not a great, but we won't have to fear that, let's say those fees had just been $400,000 more. Do you know what I mean? That was a big, that
Right,
would have
but
been a
the-
big swing.
I guess from my standpoint, the fear is still that we just get hardwired in our heads. We can never go below that number. And my question is always, what are the circumstances when you would dip below, as opposed to just thinking we can never go below this number? And I wouldn't want to see the city in a situation where we could either dip into the reserves and worry about bad PR or increase taxes. That's not my question.
Right,
It's just a cash flow financing.
And that's what you would do. You would say, okay, we normally have, whenever you're looking at your budget, say for, I'm going to go 2013 year, and say you have that 15%. Say you're at that 15%. And then you know for 2013, you're going to have to buy a fire truck or ambulance or something, and say you don't have enough money in the capital improvements tax. And you know that that's going to be enough in there to use some of it. Well, that would be fine to use some of it because that's what you kind of set it aside for. Does that answer the question? Does
Right.
that kind of help?
That's what I was trying to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, and the same I'd said in the past, it's just kind of so that you kind of make a conscious effort of, okay, are we dipping in, you just kind of know, and the professionals, I mean, even too, if at one point you need the money for 30 days because of a timing difference, and yet at the long run you're going to save, and you're going to put it right back in, it makes sense to use it. Do you know what I mean? So,
Your Honor, may I?
Alderman
May I think
Robertson.
we're all talking about the restricted fund is what we're talking about, or the unrestricted
Unrestricted,
funds.
general
But we
revenue
have
fund.
restricted funds as well, which we are considering as part of our reserves as well. Like we talked about in our aldermanic workshop in June when we welcomed several new members to the board, that really we're talking about a much higher amount of reserves. It's just that we have to move the funds from other funds to that point where if we really do have a true emergency.
Right, yeah.
We're really
True
talking about a lot
emergency,
more money.
I think in the money market account, there's over $2.5 million right now, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, if there was a true emergency, kind of thing. So, but you would have to then, like Tammy was saying, sometimes you borrow from the general revenue fund in order to help a capital improvement project, but sometimes you can borrow from the capital improvement. It just has to be reimbursed later when those funds come in from the general revenue. And in government, that happens all the time. Yeah, because again, sales tax come in at different levels. So, okay.
and when you do that, as far as restricted accounts, like because the sewer and stormwater is supposed to be used strictly for that, or Parks and Rec and that, when you borrow from that, like you issue a note, you make sure, but do you charge interest or anything, or is it you just make sure that you keep on the books that you owe that money?
You'd be charging interest to yourself.
Right. Well, I mean, I just didn't
Right.
understand. You can do that. I mean, there's no restrictions
You
on it as
could
long
do
as you
that.
note.
You could do that. You don't have to do that. You don't have to charge interest.
No, but I mean,
You do want to
but
make
it's-
sure that
it's
it's kept
appropriate
on the
to
books.
Borrow from the funds as long as you make
You
sure
can, but you actually have to keep it on the books and know that you have to pay it back.
Right.
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 Okay.
Because that is something you just can't.
Right.
You just can't use and just say, okay,
Right.
I'm going to use it.
Right.
Because it was.
But
Voted
if
on
the
for a
general
specific
fund paid
reason.
for something that should have been paid for out of the capital improvements tax, there's nothing that says you can't move some of the capital improvements money over to the general fund to take care of reimbursing that fund for the
Right.
capital that it actually expended.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks, Sammy.
Okay? Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions anytime, just either yell at me or Gina and she'll get to me, so it's not a problem. Anytime.
never yell
Thank
at
you. Well, you know what I mean. I don't mean yell, but that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on agenda is here.
Can we make a motion to accept the audit report?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to accept the auditing report for the year 2011 as presented.
Thank you.
And I just want to add, is that necessary even?
Well-
Do we need to?
I don't know if we actually.
Seems like it's just
usually
a presentation.
presented to us.
It is
yeah.
just a presentation.
Yeah, that's fine. We don't need to actually accept it. It is
We
the
definitely
audit.
don't need to adopt it,
You
Right.
don't.
yeah.
So, whichever. If somebody wants a second,
It's not
I'll
gonna hurt
second the
anything.
motion.
Thank
Okay.
you.
roll call.
Alderwoman Saunders.
Yes.
Alderwoman Manister.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy.
Yes.
Alderman Tui.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Robertson.
Yes.
Alderman Harper.
No.
Okay, thank you. Next item here, if any matter of public interest upon any persons present, if anybody would like to address the Board of Alderman, please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name is Julie Pozo. I live on St. Clair. In front of you is a list of unauthorized questionable spending of city funds. I believe I set one in front of each of you. Mayor Kelly, you have stated on more than one occasion that you're unaware of the firemen's inflated overtime, unaware the golf tournament was taking a loss, and that you thought the baseball writers' dinner tickets were donated by Gene Dell. If it is true that Chris C. Mayer abused his authority and authorized this questionable spending, shouldn't there be an investigation? Per our municipal code, the city administrator is bonded for 1, public employee dishonesty coverage, $1 million with a $250 deductible, and 2, forgery or alteration coverage for $25,000 with a deductible of $250. Has the city looked into recouping some of the lost revenue through this means? All of you board members took an oath of office. In that oath, you promised to uphold the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, and the ordinances of the city. In the Missouri Revised Statutes, Chapter 79, for fourth-class cities, a portion of the officer's oath bond states, every officer of the corporation, when required by law or ordinance, shall within 15 days after his appointment or election, and before entering upon the discharge of the duties of his office, give bond to the city in such sum and with such sureties as may be designated by ordinance, conditioned upon the faithful performance of his duty, and that he will pay over all monies belonging to the city as provided by law that may come into his hands. If any person elected or appointed to any office shall fail to take and subscribe such oath or affirmation, or to give bond as herein required, his office shall be deemed vacant. For any breach of condition of any such bond, suit may be instituted thereon by the city or by any person in the name of the city to the use of such person. Simply said, you promise to protect the assets of the city. As an elected official, you have a duty to the residents of Brentwood to recover some of the lost revenue by Chris C. Mayer. It seems only logical to pursue a civil lawsuit against Chris. It is unbelievable to me that C. Mayer was allowed to resign, thereby taking with him accrued sick leave and vacation. Then, as discussed at the last Board of Alderman meeting, and according to the city's 2011 annual report that we just heard, our reserves are a measly 4%. This obviously shows poor fiscal management. Maureen Saunders has repeatedly asked to have an employee compensation survey, and why she has not been given this is incomprehensible. The city recently hired an HR person. Wouldn't that fall under one of her duties? Mayor Kelly, you stated at the last Board of Alderman meeting that the city of Clayton did a survey and it cost upwards of $100,000. We contacted the city of Clayton to verify that amount, and we were told the cost was in the low 20s. And they gave us the names of other cities that recently obtained employee compensation surveys. In my opinion, there is no excuse for our city not to have that survey. This audit clearly shows the city does not have the funds to sustain this current level of spending. All spending should be justified with priority given to safety and government regulations. For instance, is the cost of a car for the city administrator justified? The police have requested, along with Maureen Saunders in her budget request, 3 additional officers. We have seen an increase in crime in this area due to the new development and our location. Protecting the residents should be your #1 priority. If crime continues to increase, families will not want to live or shop here. If increased police presence makes us safer, we need to ensure there is money in the budget to add these officers. This may mean reducing spending in other areas. You need to get your act together and demonstrate fiscal responsibility. Thank you.
Susan Ryan, 9324 Pine Avenue. Nice quick question. Maybe I don't understand it. I'm just looking at the bills. It's got 5697, 5698, 5699, 5701. Do they ever have to be in order? 5700 is missing.
It was adopted at the last meeting.
Okay.
It was.
Right. So that you can.
They do have to be in order.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
We put the first three, 97, 98, 99 on hold
That's okay.
last month. And
Right.
then we passed 5,700
Okay.
as the only action that we actually did take last month.
Okay, great. Thanks. It just popped out at me. I'm an accountant.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, I see those things. I wanted to talk about, you referred to the organization chart. And what I heard you say, and what I also saw when I looked at the organization chart, is the citizens are at the top.
Yep.
And that boards and commissions have a direct line responsibility to the citizens. I specifically asked and had some concerns about an individual's comments and conduct on one of the boards and commissions. And I asked the city if they could provide me with the ethics values that Brentwood has in place. I just heard that you all attested to your own ethics and your own code of conduct. I believe that I received a ethics code that really related to the city administrator and staff. And what I also received back was that Brentwood doesn't require the boards and commissions to sign any sort of secondary oath, certification, or whatever, and that the individual's professional oath would cover their service to the city. Am I not making myself clear?
You're good.
Okay.
I'm following where you're going.
Okay, all right. So, because again, I see their service to the citizens, there should be some sort of certification to the citizens. And I would like to see, I'm not sure who I forwarded it to, but I have done some just sort of simple research and looking for code of ethics and core value statements that other cities may have taken the time and energy to adopt or even draft. I would like to see that the board consider and review adopting a similar code of ethics and core value that I've provided. I think that they can step back and provide it for you. And it was simply designed to provide a clear, positive statements of ethical behavior reflecting the core values of the community. It talks about that code of ethics and values is the touchstone for members of the board, commissions, and committees in fulfilling their roles and responsibilities. Just as a preamble, it said that the proper operation of democratic government requires that decision makers be independent, impartial, and accountable to the people they serve. I would like us to see whether or not it is simple. I don't understand the Robert's Rules of Order. I don't want a pocket. I don't want to carry around a pocket guide. So I had forwarded. I'm not sure if you remember that one, seeing I do so much. Sorry. A code of ethics and core values be adopted for Brentwood and considered, as well as any board and commission sign that they attest to their a code of conduct certification, that they are, in fact, responsible to the citizens, and that I shouldn't have to go to their professional organization to submit a breach of conduct. Second, I also submitted what was a standard of, it was building trust in a community, and it was a simple, well-written behavioral standard for public meetings. I think that it is important that we all feel safe, we all feel that we can voice our opinion, be listened to, as well as all the citizens behave in a decent, considerate manner to you as well. So I would like both of those to be considered. If I will send them again to you, seeing I know.
I have it, and I've sent it to the board.
Okay, great.
Our server was down,
received mine.
so you all didn't
Yeah.
get it.
I've got it.
And forgive me for the other thing I sent because it was a mistake. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. One more.
Karen Smith, and
A couple of things. Compensation, I was following up on something that a resident brought up previously. At the last meeting, we did say we were going to look at doing a compensation survey, so is that right?
Well, I mean, well, go ahead. No, just it.
Okay, so I was just following up on that, because at the last meeting, I thought I heard that we said that we were going to do that. And then I had a question on the policy on, I guess it's the fraud, Bill 5701, page 6. It says in there, if an employee has reason to believe that the city clerk administrator may be involved in fraudulent activity, he or she should notify the mayor or city attorney. I guess I brought this up at the ward meetings, Ward 1, Ward 3 combination meeting. I think I would encourage the board to consider very strongly also adding the police on that. I think that if you listen to the police tapes, I think we need to make sure that the city employees have some place to go if they feel that their concerns are not being addressed. And so I think that putting that layer in there would protect the city resources assets that we have that were not protected under the previous way that we have operated. I also think that if we do have a problem in the city and there does need to be an investigation, that I also encourage, and I didn't see this in this, but I think we should use an outside, I don't know if it's police or investigative resource other than our own police department. The prosecuting attorney's office did say that our police department did an excellent job, and I would agree with that. However, they did leave things on the table, and you could tell from the police tapes, if you listen to them, you can tell the way they had to work through the questions with the different employees. It was very uncomfortable, and we placed them in a very, very, very uncomfortable situation that they shouldn't have had to be in. And I think if we used an outside resource, and again, we could say that that's going to cost more money, but that's the cost that you pay when you don't do business the right way. And we've got to learn. We've got to start stepping up and being accountable for that. And we left things on the table under the way that we did this before. And then my last questions, and I'm sorry that Tina left because I have questions related to the audit. But just in my looking at it, I'm not an accountant and I'm not a CPA, Patrick, like you are. But just my simple terms, I do look at a lot of financial statements in the job that I have. It appears to me that our expenses are growing faster than our revenue. And I don't know that I would agree with the statement said earlier that, some of the situations that we had last year were unique. I think health insurance benefits are going to continue to increase. We have to get a handle on that. We cannot stop things like legal suits from happening. Those are things that will come up, and we need to have a better reserve, better resources to be able to handle these things. The reserves being at $400K to me seems exceptionally low. I hope that your personal finances are better than this. And I guess, Tom Kramer, I would ask that you might share with us kind of the policy that Brentwood Forest has. You mentioned that you have a reserve in Brentwood Forest that you seem to be a little bit more comfortable with. So maybe you could share with us what that is. And I would encourage the board, if that seems reasonable, that we should consider that. I did see in the management letter that we are going to be adopting a policy on reserves. And to Patrick Chewy, to your comment, in that policy, we could identify when it would be appropriate to dip into that reserve so that, to meet your concerns. I also don't know that by maintaining that reserve and having it at a certain level, if we run into a hiccup, I don't know that our only recourse is to raise taxes. I keep hearing you always say, we don't want to have to raise taxes. Another big side of the equation is the cost. And again, someone, Julie Pozo, brought up earlier about all of the costs that we have had kind of seep out over the last couple of years due to not having appropriate policies and procedures in place. And I think that's a real area that we can look at and continue to look at more closely. Some questions that I had about the report. In this report, it does mention the balances like revenues and expenditures. It also talks about assets and liabilities for the different debt service funds. And so it lists out, so let's see here, bear with me. So it lists out Hanley Station, which that's the Home Depot, right?
No, Hanley Station is Hanley Station where Buffalo Wild Wings, Hula Hands,
Ah, okay, all right.
Condominium.
the condominiums, right?
All right, all right.
Hotel.
Okay. And then the Point is Deerberg's, and
Right.
that's in there.
Yeah.
And then the Brentwood Eager, that's the Meridian, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Brentwood Point, we've paid that off. Is that why that's not in there?
No, the Promenade is paid off. Brentwood Point will be paid off
Okay,
November
right.
of
I'm sorry. Brentwood
2013.
Point is in there. I'm sorry. I can't read my own handwriting here. Promenade is paid off, so that's not why that's not in there.
Correct.
Strassner is not in here because
It doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't
It's
exist.
been paid.
Has it been paid
It was
or?
folded into the Hanley Road Corridor TDD.
Okay, that's folded in there. Okay, and is that the only?
Brentwood Square. you're
And
missing.
Brentwood Square is also folded in there, and that's
No.
not.
Oh, the TDD? Or are you talking about the TIF?
So, what are these statements that we're reporting on back here? Are we reporting on the TIFs or the TDDs?
The TIFs.
The TIFs only.
Right.
Okay, so we don't have a TIF on the square. Is that
No,
why that's not in
no,
there?
that TIF will be paid off in November of 2014.
So, do we have a square in here then?
Should be.
Sure, yeah.
Let's see if that's in there.
Page 54. Page 54. It's in there.
Really? Okay, so I'm on page 55.
Brentwood Square is 54.
No, that's stormwater and park on. My page numbers are off. All right, well, I'll look. But why isn't Hanley Eager in here? Because that would be where Strassner and.
Well,
Is Hanley Eager in here too? Am I just not seeing it?
Hanley Eager TDD? Or are you
TIF.
ta-
Is there a TIF with that? Is there a TIF
It's
with?
Eager Road Associates is the TIF. Isn't
Page
that their-
57
Right.
is what Brentwood Eager Road.
But when we folded in Strassner and.
Don't confuse the TIFs
Square.
with the TDDs.
Right.
That's two completely different
Okay,
things.
so is the Hanley Eager only the TDD part of the?
Hanley Road Corridor Transportation District includes, that's the one that's done in conjunction with St. Louis County, Maplewood, and the city of Brentwood.
Right.
And so they folded all of the TDDs from the Sam's and the Walmart and that.
Right.
With Strassner,
Brentwood Square.
I think Brentwood Square, and then that includes the Promenade, which did not have a TDD before that. Right.
So there's no TIF mixed in with that Hanley Eager. Okay. All right. All right. And then the last question that I had is on page 46, where they list out all of the debt service definitions. They're all the same definition, and I didn't know if that was supposed to be that way. I mean, I know this document's already been submitted, but maybe next year that needs to be cleaned up because each of these different funds are for different reasons related to those debt service funds, right?
Right. We can clarify that.
All right.
Okay.
Is that the definition of what is an allowable expense?
Expense, I think so.
And I
right.
believe
that's why I said
all
I
of
just
them are
want
supposed to
clarification.
be the same
Right.
It is
as
the
to
same.
where you can take the money from the TDD.
Right.
And how you can spend it to accomplish a project if it falls under the definition that was approved by the voters when we established the TDD.
That's right.
And
Well,
we used,
the voters don't vote on those TDDs. We don't vote on that.
Oh, yeah.
No, they could. They have.
They have.
approved the Strassner Road Transportation
Yeah.
Development District.
That's the only one, though. The rest, and that wasn't the whole city. That was just people that lived in that.
within the
area.
district.
Right.
Those
Within
who
the
live in the
district,
district vote,
Right.
vote
Because
to
that's
put
the
it.
way you
The
have to do
people
it.
that are paying for that additional sales tax aren't able to vote on those taxes.
Well, not in that
I can't.
instance.
I'm not paying. I didn't
Not-
get to vote on it.
Yeah.
Right, but but if you included the entire city of Brentwood, then the tax would have had to have been on the entire city of Brentwood.
Brentwood.
So it would have applied to every retailer in the city.
Right.
So that's why you do it by district.
Right. But the voters don't, I mean, we don't that tax is not only paid for by those people.
Well,
the rest of us all have to pay that
It's just
tax.
like a sales tax that the city of Brentwood voters approve, and then people that shop here have to pay it.
Right, right. It's taxation without representation. It is, I'm sorry.
Well, then we could just fold the city and not have revenue.
No, I'm only talking about the TDDs.
Well,
Only talking about the TDDs. So the way this reads, the fund is used to account for accumulation. Each one of these these funds are for different reasons, aren't they? Related to the
we'll get a
TIF?
clarification.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Now we'll move it on to introduction, reading, and passage of bills. If I could have a motion for the first and second readings of bills number 5697, 5698, 5699, 5701.
Are you going to address any comments that were made?
Well, what was the first one? I was going to address one. What was it?
Indentured
Bonds.
bonds, state statute versus our code, compensation surveys.
Oh, compensation survey. Actually, I did want to address that. Again, this is something that's been talked about at the committee level in order to do a survey. And I have to apologize if I had the number wrong for Clayton. That's what I was told. I'm sorry about that. But they are expensive if you're going to do them right, is the point. And this has been talked a little. Comments have been made at the committee level, but again, nobody has taken any action to actually make a motion to have one done. And so do I think we can do one? Yeah, that's fine, but it really should come out of the Ways and Means Committee because it's not something that's budgeted right now or something that needs to go into the budget for next year. I think staff is already contacting some of the other municipalities that have done some to see if they can acquire their surveys, and I think they're working on that. So, and maybe that'll be enough instead of having to pay for our own, which would even be better. So, but again, the board needs to take some action. I mean, it's not fair to come up and criticize all the time when all we need, this needs to be discussed and somebody needs to make a motion to do it. Nobody's saying not to. I think it's a fine idea. I'm not trying to hide anything, but we as a board, as a city, need to take the action in order to do that. Nobody's made that motion at any committee that I'm aware of, as much as it's been talked about. Okay, so that's fine. But we are working. We're contacting other cities and seeing if maybe we can get some of those other surveys. The other thing that I don't think is fair is at last meeting, and I have to apologize to the city administrator that I didn't do this at the last meeting, but I think it is unfair for the residents and people to get up and criticize the fact that the city had put in the budget a car for the city administrator. That was something that was part of the agreement that was offered to the city administrator when that position was filled when they came here to the city of Brentwood. And it is something that is part of most of every position of municipalities our size throughout St. Louis County, and that people at that level either have a car or they have they use the use of a car, a city car, or they get a stipend to help for their auto expenses, kind of thing. So, and the reason, first of all, the budget wasn't $40,000; it was $30,000, and the reason we put that number in there was because what we were talking about doing was to try to buy a hybrid for the city, not knowing what that would cost. The goal originally was what they were going to look at was going to be an Escort hybrid. We wanted to see how that worked out, how much it would save in gas, and Public Works would be able to track it from a maintenance standpoint, and then see how long we can keep that car. And so we didn't know, actually I think when we finally started looking around, it was going to be about $24,000 is what the car was going to cost. But then they stopped making them, so we couldn't get one. So that's what kind of delayed. And but again, we were going to look at a new car specifically for that reason, to try out a hybrid in order to see how that worked out as a city vehicle. But again, that was something that this board, not the new members, but the Board of Alderman put in the agreement when the city administrator was hired. And so if people want to criticize, then criticize the Board of Alderman, don't criticize the city administrator. And I'm not saying everybody. I'm just saying I think there's been a lot of direction at the city administrator that's unduly called for. And, if the board decides they don't want to buy a new car, then they don't buy a new car. But that's a decision the Board of Alderman needs to make. Those are two things I wanted to address.
The bond,
Yeah. If I may,
how does the bond work? I'm
Bonding for,
Julie
City-
read
for-
the state statute. The City of Brentwood's code establishes that the mayor and the city administrator shall have bonds, and they establish the dollar amounts and everything, and the city picks up those costs. There is nothing in our codes that requires the Board of Aldermen or any member of any of the boards to also be bonded or have coverage to work with,
right.
to go after. And I do believe the two bonds that are required are in place for
I
both the
believe-
mayor
right,
and the city
right.
administrator
Right.
to
Okay.
work with.
So did we try to collect on that, I think is the question. Did we go after?
Well, again,
did we
I think
use
that's
the-
something we'll talk in executive session.
Oh, okay, thank
All
you.
right. Okay.
Your Honor,
Alderman Kramer.
I have I just wanted to, since it was brought up, I've got a couple items that I was going to bring up under new business to kind of capture some thoughts that have been questioned.
Okay.
So I have those coming up.
Okay. All right. So, do we have a motion for first and second reading of the bills?
3 bills, and we don't need a first and second on the resolution, do we not?
Well, there's 4 bills.
4 bills, okay.
Okay.
I'll move for first and second reading of all 4 bills.
And second?
I'll second, Your Honor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. First read.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I believe the first 3 bills were placed on hold at the last meeting, and there should probably be a motion to remove them from hold.
Okay. Can we have a motion to remove bill number 5697, 5698, and 5699 from hold?
I'll make that motion.
And second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. First reading of bill number 5697.
First reading bill number 5697 by title only, an ordinance to confirm, ratify, and approve the rate of tax to be assessed and collected for each $100 of assessed valuation for the year 2012 for A, municipal general purposes, B, to pay principal and interest as the same matures on indebtedness of the city of Brentwood evidenced by bonds, and C, to provide the annual contribution to the city of Brentwood's police and firemen's retirement fund, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and providing for the repeal of all conflicting ordinances.
Thank you. Any questions?
Should B be stricken since we don't have something for debt service in there, or?
You still have to list it, I believe.
Oh, you still listed, okay.
Okay.
Synopsis.
Oh, I'm sorry, synopsis, thank you.
Your Honor, Bill 5697 is one that takes into account annually the City of Brentwood's requirement by state statute to hold a public hearing prior to establishment of the tax rate on real and personal property for the City of Brentwood. Bill authorizes the mayor of the city to set the 2012 tax rate for the general fund, pension fund, and debt service fund. The City of Brentwood assesses no residential ad valorem taxes. Also this year, the city will not assess a debt service tax rate because the 2 general obligation bond issuances have been paid off this year. In addition, the city assesses a much lower tax rate than the ceiling would allow at some savings to the taxpayer.
Okay.
And I
thank
have
you.
a
Alderwoman
question
Sanders.
on this. In the past, or at the last meeting, I believe, Mayor, Your Honor, you said that the police and firemen pension fund, that we don't set that tax rate either, that it was like the library. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I don't believe, I called, because I'm still trying to understand these taxes, and I called the Missouri State Auditor's Office, and I spoke with them, and I asked them about the library and about the pension fund, and they said that both of those were levies of the city, unless the city had actually authorized those entities to set the tax rate. And I asked BOLA for the ordinances, and the pension fund spells out that the Board of Aldermen set the tax rate for the police and fire pension. And the library ordinance doesn't grant that power either. It's just granting the power of the property and management and so forth. And so I spoke with a Becky Webb there at the Missouri State Auditor's Office, and she said, you know, we have it as a levy of the city. And she said, you know, like whereas the school district is its own district taxing entity, and several libraries are listed separate with the state of Missouri, but Brentwood's is not. And can you clarify, because when we met at Ways and Means, I mean, first of all, I know this was was a complicated issue, and we had very little time to understand it. I mean, the information was given to us Friday night before Labor Day weekend, and we had to meet on Tuesday. And so it was a complicated issue, and we had passed the 30 cents at Ways and Means because Vicki had told us, the library director, that we had no say in this. She said, actually her words were, the library, that if the library were to go away, if the city were to go away, that the library would still exist without us. And she said that it's not the purview of this board. At the time she was referring to Ways and Means, it's that the library board sets the tax. She said the state statutes, yes, you're your own taxing district. The state statutes are written that the library board sets those rates, and they have voted that this is the rate they would like to go with, which is the county clerk's assessment. And then she went on to say, if you have any further discussion, questions, you might want to take it up with them, referring to the library board, which is what I did do. I did go to that meeting the next day. So, you know, when it was suggested that I was uninvited, one, it's a public meeting, and the library still exists on taxpayer dollars. But I went there with the intention of explaining that if you took only the nickel increase, which Alderman Leahy had brought up at Ways and Means, and I concurred with him, that it would be the $19 per $200,000 assessed valuation is what was in the literature. And if they actually went to the 30 cents, they would be taking $57. So it was as Sherman Lee put it, a perfect storm brewing, you know, lots of emotions running high, trying to understand a very complicated tax, you know. So I don't fault them. In the end, I thank the library board for doing the right thing. I put that in the patch. I'm happy that they followed through with what they had told the voters, but I'm still having difficulty understanding, is this our purview or theirs? And the state auditor's office says ours, and I did ask Lee, and I asked another board member, they have never, the library has not voted in the past on setting the tax rate. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, I can only tell you the process that has happened in the past, and I think they may not have voted, but I know the city administrator talked to them about what they wanted the rate to be. And I think, generally speaking, for both the pension fund and the library, the rate was always set at the highest possible level. And so I don't know that they ever voted on it because it was always at whatever it could be. You're making a face.
Library tax for the last 20-something years has been 15 cents, and they're allowed to go to 25 cents.
Well, no, because of the Hancock Amendment had been reduced.
Nope.
No.
Hancock Amendment didn't change the...
Then there wouldn't have been any need for them to go for a tax
Unfortunately, that is a true statement, sir. That was the miscommunication at the intent of trying to figure out where they needed to be to work with. The trick is, and where it stands now, if the city of Brentwood, who appoints the library board, in funding and making that commission, did not task them by ordinance to set the tax rate, then the tax rate stays with the city.
Okay.
We have taken the library's recommendation as a recommended board. We could change it at any time with the Board of Alderman. In this case, the library has reviewed the situation and have come back to us with a lower tax than what was originally approved by the Ways and Means recommendation to come to the Board of Alderman. That's the second bill that you're looking at to work with. Now, in my research of ordinances for the library, I too found no authorization from the Board of Aldermen authorizing the library to set its own tax to work with. But they could always recommend to us, and that's what we've allowed them to work through.
Right.
To go after.
But again, I think I would have to research that more. You know, I think that it was the understanding of at least
it was
myself and library that they were always at the ceiling. And I can assure you with the Police and Firemen's Pension Fund, it has always been that way too, because they have never gotten to the point yet of being fully funded. Although I will say that from a funding standpoint, it's probably one of the best funded, or one of the top funded pension funds in the state of Missouri, because of the support of the Brentwood voters increasing the tax a few years ago for the Police and Firemen's Pension Fund, which was under the same cloud, I guess, of the Hancock Amendment in that it had reduced it, even though their ceiling at the time was 32 cents, and I think at that point they were down to 24 cents that they could actually assess. And I think that, I'm pretty confident, that was the same case with the library in that they were charging the most that they could under the Hancock Amendment, even though their ceiling was 25 cents. Right.
Yes.
And so that's why they needed to go for the nickel increase. And so, I mean, we can split hairs. It really doesn't make any difference. You know, again, you know, if we want to set the tax rate, then go ahead and set the tax rate. But I think we had always tried to take it to the ceiling of what that was for those two entities. But I do think that what they presented to the voters was a nickel increase.
Correct.
And again, because the terminology got confusing, I guess, for them when they wrote their ballot language, it had mistakenly raised it actually a new ceiling to 30 cents,
Correct.
which actually could have given them a 15-cent increase.
Correct.
Okay. So, but, you know, I'm just telling you what the process has been all these years. You know, we always took the recommendation. I don't know if they voted on it or not. I don't go to their committee meetings. It was always my understanding it was a recommendation of those two committees, those two, that we were just keeping it at the highest level. Alderwoman Sanders.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, Mayor Kelly, but when you say, like, you know, it doesn't really matter whether we said it, they said it, but for me it does matter a little bit because I was taken to task for even asking questions about this, and I was just trying to understand the process. And I was at Ways and Means, and I was very nice. I said, I love the library, and I would love for you to have 30 cents, and I'd love for that windfall also to come to the city. I mean, you know, it was very, I was trying to be nice. I have nothing against the library. I love them. I mean, when they said, too, that they've never had a visitor at their meeting, last September I was there because there was missing funds. And they didn't quite understand, and there had been a note that wasn't documented and so forth. So I had attended a meeting before. But like I said, I was taken to task. Alderman Toohey also took me to task at the last meeting, and I want to get this clarified. Now on their minutes, it says that I told them to take 30 cents, and that was not my intention. I will swear under oath on a stack of Bibles that I went there to tell them if they went from 15 to 30, they would be taking $57 for a 200 assessed value. And if they went from 15 to 20, it would be 19. And 19 was what was in their literature. I know it was a complicated topic, and maybe it was misinterpreted, and maybe that's one of the reasons, too, that I like the verbatim minutes because, you know, I mean, that might have been their interpretation, but that is not why I went to that meeting. And I just feel like at Ways and Means asking questions, I was being told that we had no autonomy here whatsoever. We had no say in it. And I was like, okay, well, then we'll just pass this. And then later I go to find out, do a little bit of homework, and I find out something different. And as a resident, not even an alderwoman, I should have been able to go to that meeting and ask questions. And they actually took a vote to allow me to speak. So I did not barge in. They actually had a vote taken whether I could speak or not. And it did pass, and I did speak. And I only stayed up there, too. They said I was there for an hour or whatever. I gave my $19, $20 thing as quickly as I could on the board. But the members kept asking me questions, and so I went back up, and it did get very complicated. And like I said, I harbor no ill will. I want to move forward with them. I'm so glad they did the right thing, and that's what I said. But there is confusion about this 30 cents because at the Ways and Means, Alderman Kramer, you said that the library knew for a long time the ballot language, and they also knew in advance the amount of revenue they were going to get, and that you were upset that there was not a precast of how much they were going to devote towards prepaying down the balance that they owed to the city versus waiting to do, waiting to do it, and that was just your opinion. So they were aware, and the city was aware of this $400,000 windfall. But
Right.
well, I'm just saying what Alderman Kramer. So please don't. This is not my word. So I'm just saying that's what Alderman Kramer. And then when I went to that meeting, they did say, Brian said that he was surprised within the last week that he had just, the library board, I'm going to concur with you. That was Alderman Kramer's, not the library board's words. And Brian, who I complimented, he explained that they just found that out the last week, and he explained how they got to the number was by starting with 125,000 and backing into it, and he did it eloquently, and I complimented him. And again, I said the board did the right thing, and that I apologized at the end. I said I wasn't happy with my manner. You know, I don't like to lose control, and I was very apologetic, and I felt awful about it all night. But I just wanted people to know why I did, and I'm a stickler for procedure and process. That's all I have to say, and I will continue to do that. And if we need to change the rules or I'm doing something wrong, just let me know, and I will change it.
Okay. Alderman Kramer?
Yes, Your Honor. Let's see. I guess best comment I'd like to make right now is to give a bottom line. And the bottom line is that we have really good news for our residents through some, I guess you'd call them interesting but fortunate twists of events, and also some very calculated efforts and planning. The City of Brentwood residential tax rate is below, it's the lowest it's been since way before 2008. We are fortunate. It was going to be higher. It's not. But one thing I wanted to bring up in my comment, and that's this, and I say it every year, and that is that what happens when the vote leaves here is that another entity has complete and unilateral power over their own tax rates, and that is the school board. And regardless of what we do, the tax rates that you pay on the taxes for your home are completely impacted by the school district. We don't have those numbers yet. Is that right, Bola?
I don't have.
We don't have those numbers yet. They take the vote coming up soon, so it could come as a surprise. We don't know exactly where it's going to be, but just remember, if you don't like your taxes you're paying on your residents, it's not because of what we did. And the school district doesn't like me saying that, but it's the truth. We do our best to, you know, through a lot of planning, that general fund is at zero. Many municipalities don't have that. We're very, very fortunate. On top of the fact that we have to share a lot of tax revenue with other cities that don't have the retail that we do. Bottom line is we're very fortunate. I'm excited that we're at 0.5650 for the residential tax rate for the year, and I'm hopeful that we are as fortunate with the school number when it does come out. Thank you.
Okay, and just real quick, I would still like to reiterate, even though we do have school taxes, we have one of the lowest property tax rates for total property tax rates of any municipality in St. Louis County.
True.
And I think that's because the residents are able to support the school district because we're able to keep our taxes for the city as low as possible. So, and I think they have set their tax rate because they have to turn in the same
They
time
have to
we
turn
do.
the
So,
same.
right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I think
Do I have
they-
a motion for?
Second reading.
We need.
Well,
We
did we
only
have
have
second?
one.
We haven't had
Okay,
second
second
reading.
reading, please. Thank you.
Second reading bill number 5697 by title only, an ordinance to confirm, ratify, and approve the rate of tax to be assessed and collected for each $100 of assessed valuation for the year 2012 for A, general municipal purposes, B, to pay principal and interest as the same matures on indebtedness of the city of Brentwood evidenced by bonds, and C, to provide the annual contribution to the city of Brentwood's Police and Firemen's Retirement Fund, providing for the effective date of this ordinance and providing for the repeal of all conflicting ordinances.
Thank you. Have a motion, please?
Motion to approve as submitted, Your Honor, Bill 5697.
Second, Your Honor.
Motion was made by Alderman Kramer, second by Alderman Leahy. Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Saunders.
Yes.
Alderwoman Bannister.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy.
Yes.
Alderman Toohey.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Robertson.
Yes.
Alderman Harper.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bill number 5697 is now ordinance number 4374.
Thank you. Bill number 5698, first reading, please.
First reading bill number 5698 by title only, an ordinance to confirm, ratify, and approve the rate of tax to be assessed and collected for each $100 of assessed valuation for the year 2012 to pay for the maintenance of the public library, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and providing for the repeal of all conflicting ordinances.
Thank you. Synopsis, please.
Your Honor, Bill 5698 is one that is required annually for the City of Brentwood to establish the tax rate through ordinance on behalf of the Library Board, a separate taxing entity. State statute of Missouri requires we hold a public hearing prior to establishing that tax rate on both real and personal property. The Library Board, through unanimous vote, affirms the tax rate. The bill authorizes the mayor to set the 2012 tax rate for the library fund.
Thank you. Alderwoman Saunders?
I want to ask, do we want to consider at some point maybe doing an ordinance to give them the authority to
We
set their
can.
tax rate?
Actually,
I mean, I think there might be a lot more,
I do think it's actually interesting because I think it answered a question that I've had for a number of years, and I've asked St. Louis County, and they've never been able to give me an answer, is that they publish the rate book every year with all the taxes, and it lists all the separate taxing entities, but they never listed our library as a separate taxing entity.
That's what I started with.
And I've called and asked, and they always say, well, we'll get back to you, or the person that can answer the question is not there. But we always knew that the city collected the taxes and those kinds of things from revenue, but and we have to keep all those funds separate. But maybe that does answer that question. I think that's something that you could discuss at Ways and Means.
Okay. I mean, it was just a suggestion, and that's exactly, Your Honor, where this started from, was that's what I brought with me to the library board meeting, was this tax rate book, because it had it all lumped in. And like you, I started with St. Louis County, and they could not give me an answer and actually said for me to go to Brentwood. And so then, I spoke with someone at the auditor's office or assessor's office, and then eventually they referred me up to the state, and then it was this individual that knew.
Yeah, I've had residents call over the years and ask at a number of occasions and tried to get the answer and never been able to.
But
So
doesn't
that
the
probably
state
explains.
list them as their own?
They list them as part of the city.
Right.
I saw, I don't have a copy of it, but I saw a list of something, the state libraries, and it separated them out.
Bless you.
And then if you read John Danforth's opinion, he basically states that the libraries are their own taxing entities. So I don't have
I've read that opinion. I saw that on the patch, that comment, but it was the state auditor's office, and I asked them, and they said it is a levy of the city.
Right,
That's
but
exactly-
and again, I think the confusion may
And like
come
I
in that the ordinance that was adopted by the city, which established a library, and then also that says it follows certain state statutes, and in there it says that once the library is established, that, and I'm not going to get this right, but that then the library board is divested from the city and act as a separate entity, and that the city has no basic control over any of their funds and so forth. And so I think maybe over the years, that is our feeling, is that the library was a separate entity. Again, it wasn't really ever too much of an issue because of the fact that we were always charging the
Taking the
maximum
recommendation.
tax. And we were taking the recommendation, right. But it wasn't like they had the ability to assess anything less than what they could. And, but I think that can be discussed at Ways and Means.
Your Honor?
Yes.
In preparation for that discussion, may we have our city attorney prepare a legal opinion for our review on this topic?
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
Does Frank, do you maybe already know, or have you looked into that, or would you?
I would like to look into it further, but my general review of the ordinance or the state statute is that under a state statute, the library as it was organized here, the library board sets a rate, and the city collects the funds, but is under an obligation to remit it to the library, and that board determines how the money's spent.
Yeah, I know that it says in there they determine how it's spent. I just didn't think that they got to set the rate.
It may very well be that either the auditor's office or St. Louis County just has them misclassified. I don't know.
Okay.
Perhaps we could get that investigated before the next meeting.
Well, we'll take a quick look. I mean,
Thank
we'll
you.
figure that out. Okay. Do we have first and second
We
for
have
that?
first and a synopsis, second reading.
Okay. What about the motion to
Oh.
have, I'm sorry, wait a
Motion
first and second?
By
Yeah, we have
acclamation.
first and second
All
on
in
the
favor,
motion.
say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, thank you. Frank will look into that a little bit. Okay, second reading, bill number 5698, please.
Second reading bill number 5698 by title only, an ordinance to confirm, ratify, and approve the rate of tax to be assessed and collected for each $100 of assessed valuation for the year 2012 to pay for the maintenance of the public library, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and providing for the repeal of all conflicting ordinances.
Thank you. Motion, please.
Motion to approve Bill 5698 into ordinance form, Your Honor.
And second.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Motion was made by Alderman Leahy, second by Alderman Kramer. Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Saunders.
Yes.
Alderwoman Bannister.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy.
Yes.
Alderman Tui.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Robertson.
Yes.
Alderman Harper.
Yes.
Bill number 5698 is now ordinance number 4375.
Thank you. First reading of Bill number 5699, please.
First reading Bill number 5699 by title only, an ordinance establishing the annual assessment for 2012 for the City of Brentwood Sewer Lateral Repair Program at $50 and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Synopsis, please.
Your Honor, Bill 5699 is one that establishes the annual assessment for 2012, the calendar year, for the City of Brentwood Sewer Lateral Repair Program at $50. On November 4, 1997, voters approved the establishment of a fee to provide funds to pay for the cost of certain repairs of defective lateral sewer lines. At that time, the maximum fee was set at $28. On August 3, 2010, voters approved Proposition A, that to authorize an increase to the sewer lateral tax assessed annually on residential property for a maximum charge not to exceed $50. Following that, on August 16, 2010, the Brentwood Board of Alderman approved an ordinance establishing the annual assessment for 2010 for the sewer lateral program at $40. Recently, the Ways and Means Committee recommended the assessment be increased by $10 for 2012 to cover increased costs for operations and supplies, materials, and to bridge the gap between when sewer lateral revenues come in and ongoing expenses, that to continue to cover this exceptional service to all of the Brentwood residents.
Okay. Any questions? Alderman Leahy.
Your Honor, I'd like to vote no on this bill and request that Ways and Means look at, per the justification that we received, is that a large portion of the additional cost that's going on is the housing inspections that are coming through on real estate. I think the Ways and Means should look at having that type of service, obviously necessary to be done, but to be a charge service versus having all the residents pay the bill to help cover that fee, versus raising the cost here for all the residents to cover that fee. And I'd like to have the Ways and Means Committee look at increasing revenue that way versus taxing everybody the extra $10.
Okay, well, I would say that those requests are coming from the homeowners at the time to do an inspection of the sewer lateral line. I guess what you're saying is you would want to have a distinction that if somebody has their house listed, that then we would not provide that service for that resident.
There would be a cost for doing a service for something outside of a maintenance problem.
But I don't think if you're able to check, it's not, I don't think it's the cost of doing the inspection. It would be the cost of actually having to do those repairs after the inspection is done that is increasing our costs.
That's right.
Is that, Jim, if maybe you could address this for us?
The inspections that were done were already provided by the real estate agents.
No.
They've already paid for them, and then they've made us aware of any problems that there might be, and then we come over and do our own inspections.
To verify it.
To
and then
verify
the
something
repair.
that they have already looked at or had a plumber come up because of the impending sale of a home.
And you, I mean, again, don't put words in your mouth, but we've had more repairs because of those.
Right.
And that's where the cost is.
Everybody's requesting sewer lateral inspections with the sale of a home nowadays. And when they find a problem, they always contact the City of Brentwood, and we go over and do our own inspection and come up with our own conclusion whether or not we're going to make the repair or not.
Or what type of repair.
Right.
Your Honor.
Alderman Kramer.
We did, Alderman Leahy, we did discuss this at the Ways and Means level, and we did discuss the distinction between the labor and the resources put towards repairs that are verified versus an inspection request. There are times when some of the real estate agents, through the owners, or the owners through the real estate agents is usually the way it happens, make the request. But just because they bring it forward to our Public Works Department, we don't start working on something until, like any case that's brought to our attention, we verify the repair is needed.
Correct.
Just like any owner is entitled to, that eligible under the program, if a repair is needed, we'll make the repair.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't respond because a real estate agent requests an inspection. Never. They do their own first, and then we verify any repairs that need to be done.
Okay.
Alderwoman Saunders?
Yeah, I have to agree with Alderman Lay in the fact that I thought we were told in the past that we were doing those inspections for them, and that maybe they would supply the tape, you said, or
Oh,
the
no,
DVD.
no, no, no. They supply us
mean,
a DVD that's already been done, an inspection that's already been done by a plumbing company.
Right.
And we look at it, and then we go over and we do our own inspection to verify, just to make sure that it didn't come from somebody else's sewer lateral, because they all look the same inside a 6-inch pipe.
Unfortunately.
Dark and dirty. Oh, stop it.
Well, I was under that same
Oh, no, no,
same
no.
impression
When I said they
from what Alderman
supplied
Leahy
a
said.
DVD or a videotape, it was one that's already had the inspection done.
Okay, well, since that meeting too, my concern, like I did, looking at the tax rate book, Your Honor, most municipalities are still at the $28 surrounding, and I know our service is exceptional, as I've got my brochure and I did read. Again, though, I was under the impression that we were doing a lot of inspections where, once again, this brochure says if you have sewage backup, do you know what I mean, that there's a definite problem when we go in. And so in reading these numbers, too, like there was 200 and something for a year, and we've dedicated 2 full people. That, if you do that, I mean, that's not even 1 call every day of the year. So I don't understand. I mean, it seems to me a better way to account for our costs would be hours, attributed hours spent on municipal, because there's got to be days where you get no calls, and maybe some days 2 calls. And how do you have 2 people completely assigned? I mean, the accounting doesn't work for me on that, because you don't even have enough calls to have 200 and so a year. How many business days is it per year out of 360? What's the math on that? But do you see what I'm saying? There's not even 1 call a year, so how do we have 2 full-time people on it every day?
Well, I think that's the way it's been allocated, again, to help cover those costs. I think what happens if we want Public Works to keep tracking all the man-hours spent, that's fine. I mean, we can do that. I think the way it's been explained to me, and because we've had these discussions before, is that you'll have a sewer lateral that you do have guys going out and do inspections pretty regularly, responding to calls. But when you go out and do a sewer lateral, it may take 3 or 4 people to be there for 2 days repairing that. And so it's not just those 2. So yeah, could we go and keep track of everything? But I think it was kind of the law of averages is the way they were doing it, in allocating those expenses to the sewer lateral. But again, at the direction of the board, they could keep track of it however you want.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, to me, that seems a better way to, I mean, I'm not sure if they keep timesheets now, but it would be, because the reason we seem to be at a shortfall this year or getting closer to it is because then we're attributing the benefits to 2 people too. And I think since we just increased this to $40 from $28 in August of 2010, that maybe we need to get a better grasp on our costs. And, I would have thought in 2010 we would have.
Again, I think it in one hand, it's unfair to compare our service to the service of the other municipalities and what their fees charge. Because, I will tell you that in a number of municipalities, their process and what they actually do doesn't come close to what we do. One, very few of them, if any, other ones have clean-out service, so that if you have a blockage on the outside of your house, that they actually come in 24-hour call in order to cable those out. We could eliminate that service. The other item, I think you'll go and look at a lot of other municipalities. If they take in $100,000 a year and you're at the end of the year and they've already spent all their sewer lateral funds, they stop.
That's right.
And that's what their policy is. And they also only allocate a certain amount per resident. So, for instance, if I know a number of the municipalities, I think Glendale, actually, if you have a sewer lateral breakage, then you need to go out and get 3 estimates to have that repaired. Keep in mind that while you're doing this, your sewer lateral is not working. And then you have to bring that up to City Hall, and then you have to have that approved, taking the low bidder, and then again, certain municipalities, you can go and check, they only allocate, we're only going to pay $300 towards that repair. And so the other $2,000 may be the cost of to the resident. And so I think, we do provide what I would consider the elite program for our residents, and we could eliminate some of those services. a number of them don't do their own camera work to go in and see what the repair is. They'll call a plumber and have that shopped out, and then, a lot of times, actually, the resident, and I know in some municipalities, they have to pay for that up front first to show that they have a breakage. So, there's ways we can reallocate it, but, the funds have to come from somewhere to provide the services that we're doing. And again, I don't have any problem with, Ways and Means could look at those things, but I think, again, it's the quality of the service that we're providing compared to some of those other municipalities, and I don't think you can compare what we do with what they do. So that's my opinion. Alderman Kramer.
If I could also just add a couple items to your comments. One of those is that there are other municipalities that have not only the limits, but they have the co-pays from the very start. They've got the delays on the service. If you've got a blockage and something is happening, if you are running up against their limit or a delay on getting the service, I have had nothing but positive feedback on our arrangement, our program. I've had nobody complain about the fees. It's very inexpensive insurance to have compared with having to pay for this just once by yourself. Some municipalities have a limit on the amount of times a household can use this service. It's a value added for all the eligible residents in our city. And I have, over a period of years, through the Ways and Means Committee, interviewed, spoken with our street superintendent and other members of the Public Works Department, seen accounting of the hours. I have been very open about my questions regarding adding 2 men from the Public Works budget to the budget for this program. But when it appears through all accounting and all review that the men that are used in this program are sometimes added to with other men from the Public Works Department to make sure the job happens properly, I think that we're doing the right thing. I think the timeliness of this is right on target. In past years, we knew we were going to get to this point. I think the Missouri legislature is going to get to a point where they're going to raise the limits on this. Once again, at $50, it's extremely cost effective, and I'm in favor of it.
And again, I wouldn't, I think it'd be good to review all those things, and my suggestion would be go ahead and increase it this year. If we're able to build up a little bit of reserve, that's good as well, in the sewer lateral fund. And, we always have the ability to reduce it next year, lucky for us, this isn't one of the things that has falls under the Hancock Amendment. It's a fee. So we can make adjustments every year. If there ends up being a big reserve at the end of the year, we could reduce it. So, but in looking at how you want to allocate it, if that's what the board decides they want to start tracking each man hour, that's fine too. But Alderman.
Actually, I want to ask Brad Florick a question, if we can. Brad is the property manager of Brentwood Forest.
Oh, sure.
With this policy, in your opinion, knowing what you know of the structure of Brentwood Forest, for our residents, do you think it'd be cheaper to pay $28 for this and not have this service? Or do you think it's actually cheaper for them to pay the $50 and have this, basically, this service, this almost insurance plan for the residents? And if you can't answer that, that's
in
fine.
my opinion, it'd be basically cheaper for them to pay the $50 and have this as an insurance plan. Okay. Because that can get very expensive if a homeowner has to replace a lateral. Like Tom said, if you get to a point where you're at the cap or at the limit, as some municipalities put it, well, you could have a backup, a collapsed sewer, and they tell you, well, you're going to have to pay $5,000 for this. That's very easily incurred, that kind of an expense. I think right now, I think the tax rate is at 40. Is that what it is a year?
40 or 42?
Currently.
40, yeah, 40.
It's worked out very well. I haven't heard anybody complain about it. I don't think anybody's going to complain about it if it's raised another $10. I think it's a very unique service, as the mayor was saying, for this community compared to other communities. It's a good job. The Public Works Department is very efficient when they do it. In my experience at Brentwood Forest, I mean, you would think a sewer lateral would be a very large job. I've seen them when they've come in and they've dug it out, backfilled, and been gone in 2 days. And then that's pretty good. And you've got a satisfied homeowner. You don't have somebody with a lot of sewage on their carpets. They don't have a lot of interior damage because it was the situation was taken care of very quickly. I don't see no problem with it at all.
Okay. Thanks.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just wanting his opinion. He knows more about this than I do.
Yeah, I wanted to echo the positive comments as well. I think it's extremely efficient. We're looking a gift horse in the mouth, and I don't think we are supposed to be fiduciaries of the public, obviously, but another $10 for a service to ensure that it'll actually work well, to me is more than worth it. So I'm going to vote for it.
It would not be uncommon for a regular residential property in Brentwood, if they had to have their sewer lateral replaced, for that to exceed $6,000 to have that done. Very easily, actually, especially if they ended up having to go into the street, right? Or under a driveway, yes.
Bullock, can I ask you your opinion, this additional $10, is this going to help us like build up a reserve, or do you know what I mean? Like, do we feel like we have a handle on the cost? Is this, or
I believe we have a handle on the cost.
do you think
you all want
hourly
us-
would be a little bit more?
What was that?
Would hours help as far
I don't
as-
know the benefit that hours would give us. It would just be added work that Jim and his employees would have to do. I
Okay.
echo all the comments that were said tonight. It's a great, robust service when you
did-
compare it to other municipalities.
I did, and you know, to be fairness in looking at these $28, I did go like out to Clayton's and read, and theirs is very restrictive. I do
Yes.
have to agree. You have to pay for the camera thing. You have to pay a lot of the upfront costs, and then there's a certain amount. You get so many bids, and they only give you $3,000 towards it. So I do agree.
We can bring it back to Ways and
I
Means
do
in a
agree.
year if we think after we've set the target in terms
As
of
long as we
setting
get a-
reserves, and then reduce it back if you all want to do that.
My thing is that, as we know in the past, and we're moving forward, and we've got great staff now in accounting and that, but, you know, in the past, I'm afraid that maybe the funds weren't appropriately accounted for, and I just want to make sure.
They were.
They were.
They were.
Okay, well, I just know, you know what I mean, I didn't know for sure, so, anyway, if that's the case, okay, thank you.
Okay. Second reading.
Second reading, bill number 5699 by title only, an ordinance establishing the annual assessment for 2012 for the City of Brentwood's sewer lateral repair program at $50 and providing for the effective date of this ordinance.
Motion, please.
I'll make that motion, Your Honor.
Second.
I'll second it.
Motion is made by Alderman Robertson, seconded by Alderman Harper. Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Saunders.
Yes.
Alderwoman Bannister.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy.
No.
Alderman Tui.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Robertson.
Yes.
Alderman Harper.
Yes.
Bill number 5699 is now ordinance number 4376.
First reading of bill number 5701.
First reading, bill number 5701 by title only, an ordinance authorizing the amendment of the City of Brentwood's current employee handbook, providing a fraud policy and policies regarding payout of accrued vacation and sick leave.
Synopsis, please.
Your Honor, Bill 5701 is a product of conversation and dialogue with members of the Ways and Means Committee who recommended a fraud policy regarding the payout of accrued vacation and sick leave, and it be developed and adopted prior to the adoption of the revised employee handbook, which will be discussed this fall. Adopting this policy now would put the following safeguards into place. Employees who resign from the City of Brentwood will be offered a severance package that contains any payouts of sick and or vacation leave to which they are entitled. Acceptance of this severance package by the employee will release the city from any future employment-related liability. If there are reasons to believe an employee may not be leaving in good standing, the city administrator may reject a written resignation and terminate the employee after discussing the matter with the Board of Alderman. Violation of the city's fraud policy may be one of the many reasons why an employee may not be leaving in good standing. Employees who are terminated are not eligible to receive their accrued vacation or sick leave, and the associated fraud policy defines what constitutes fraud and outlines the city's zero tolerance position.
Second reading.
Second reading, bill number 5701 by title only, an ordinance authorizing the amendment of the City of Brentwood's current employee handbook, providing a fraud policy and policies regarding payout of accrued vacation and sick leave.
Okay, any questions? Motion?
No, I have a question.
Alderman Saunders.
I agree with Karen Smith that on page 6 that we need to amend this as far as reporting, telling the police. Actually, I think, you know, since this is fraud, I mean, this is actually, you know what I mean, this policy is for, when we read it, embezzlement, misappropriate, fraud, that at any level, the employee should inform the police, and then, you know, an investigation will be done or whatever, and there's protection in there that if they're doing it frivolously, do you know what I mean? So it doesn't have to be, you know, out in the open until they've done some, but I do agree that this won't protect us from what happened over this past year if we don't tell the police, because, for instance, like with the city clerk administrator telling the mayor and the city, he did say there was credit card use $1,000 a year ahead of time, and Mayor, you didn't know that he was talking about himself, but the thing is nothing set off bells or alarms to, one, find out why, who could all of a sudden use a credit card for cash withdrawals on a city, and then the follow-up, who did this and action taken, and as a result, the problem grew. I mean, it was allowed to exist, and so I think immediately notifying the police is a good option, or I can't see the downside to that.
Well, that's actually what took place in this instance once it was fully discovered that that's what was taking place. But, and again, there's nothing, I mean, you can add it, that's fine. I don't think anybody has a problem with that, but there's nothing to stop anybody from going to the police at any time, to tell you the truth. And we would want, you know, in a case where somebody felt that they needed to do that they would do it. You know, but again, I think what we're talking about specifically, if it's somebody at the highest level or the highest levels within the city, that you want to do that. But whatever the board decides, that's fine. Alderman Lay.
I'll yield to Frank's opinion. I'm under the impression if an employee takes a matter to the police department and goes outside of the employment of the city of Brentwood through the administrative side, that they are not protected by the Whistleblower Act, and they open themselves up for a libel suit.
And I'll have to defer to McMahon Berger on this. This policy was developed in conjunction with our labor attorneys. Yeah. And to change the recommendation as far as the reporting procedure, I think, is something that should be reviewed by them.
Your Honor.
Alderman Kramer.
Listening to my esteemed Alderwoman Saunders' comments, I certainly respect those. We did have a pretty detailed conversation about this. We got some wonderful insight from our attorney on the labor side of things, and I think that it would be prudent if there was, at this juncture, request to make an alteration to his wording, which I personally am satisfied with, that if the committee or if the aldermen and the committee feel that there's no emergency or emergent act in this regard, we take it back to committee and get his comment at that time.
Do you want to make a motion to place Bill number 5701 on hold?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Well, I wanted to ask, I did want to ask the question, how is this policy developed? If we're developing it with the advice of a labor attorney and in accordance with state statutes and current law practice, I don't know why we should take it back to a committee and talk about it again. They're the experts. I'm not. I'm going to vote against that.
Well, again, I think it's because we're not in any hurry. You know, we want to obviously get this done, but at the same time, just as a point of clarification, just to make it clear for everybody, that's it's not something we have done today. Alderman Saunders.
Well, and in response to that, Alderman Robertson, the labor attorney has been giving us a lot of advice, and we've been kind of picking through it. I mean, we haven't accepted everything that they've said at Ways and Means. We take some of it, and some of it we say, no, we want to stick with this wording. So it is just advice. So.
Okay.
Your Honor, hopefully we'll get this. Hopefully this will be a quick item when we can ask our city administrator to bring this to the attention. We'll have an answer at the next meeting. At the next
Ways and Means meeting.
Okay.
Can I ask, since you mentioned the next Ways and Means meeting too, because now we're moving along, I think, a little quicker with the draft employee, because will we at that meeting be addressing that organization chart that's in there? Is that where we're going to be?
No, the employee handbook has gone to the Board of Alderman.
Budget first, as quick as we can.
Right. The primary focus of the next Ways and Means is the budget.
The budget. Okay.
So it's doubtful, unless we're there for 4 or 5 hours, that we could knock all these items out.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't know. So the draft is now coming, so we're going to have the organization chart at this level, the discussion?
We'll have it at that, Your Honor. if I could respond. My understanding, Alderwoman Saunders, from my point of view, is that the first thing, since we have a timeline within the code to attack the budget, is to go down that lane, do as much as we can, hopefully get that cleared out within 2 meetings. If we have a quick opinion from the attorney on this topic, for example, at the budget meeting, we can get that out of the way.
Okay.
But in terms of discussion items, we want to stick to it first, and then if we have discussion on the organizational chart and the code update and the employee handbook, that'll be at a following meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We had a first and a second to place this bill on hold. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? One opposed. Alderman Robertson. Thank you.
Wait a minute. You've had 2 readings to the bill.
Right, and then
we're placing it on hold.
Right.
Okay, and we're going to go back
We'll have
for-
additional readings when it
for
comes
a
back.
for a potential revision to that paragraph.
Right.
Correct.
We would do the readings again anyway. That's fine. Okay, motion to adopt Resolution 983. This is part of the application process to allow the Parks Department to apply for a grant. If I'm not mistaken, the primary purpose of this grant is for the repaving of a section of our park trails that are in need of repair. So again, this is just part of the application. Without it, we can't submit the application. So is there any other question? Or do you have a synopsis? Or did I even need to do that?
No, Your Honor, you're pretty clear. 983 it authorizes the City Administrator, BOLA, to apply for a grant and aid from the Municipal Parks Grant Commission Round number 13, and that's to improve Maple Trail that begins at the inline rink over there by Hanley Memorial Park, goes through Rogers Parkway to Manchester Road. Public Works Committee did review this, and they do support staff's recommendation.
Okay.
Your Honor, could I add to that?
Yes.
I just wanted to mention to the public that we are studying, as they may or may not know already, expanding the trail system in Brentwood, because we have sections of wonderful trails, but they unfortunately don't extend throughout the city, and I think most people would be very pleasantly surprised at the effort that we're going to make to improve the city in that way. So
Good.
This is one part of it.
Okay. Motion, please.
Motion to approve Resolution 983 as submitted, Your Honor.
And second?
Second.
Your Honor.
Motion was made by Alderman Lay, second by Alderman Robertson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next item, accounts against the city. Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor, the aldermen should have before them the most up-to-date of a warrant list in the amount of $70,663.77. I have reviewed the document, made a few recommendations for explanation adjustments, and I am recommending that the aldermen approve the document if they have no questions.
Okay, any questions? We have a second?
Second the motion, Your Honor.
Motion was made by Alderman Kramer, second by Alderman Lay to accept the warrant list as submitted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next item, reports of committees and department heads. Under the mayor's report, I got a few announcements. First, I want to thank the staff and the heavens above that we had great weather at Brentwood Days again this year. I think it was a little overcast, but actually it turned out to be very comfortable, a really nice event both Friday and Saturday. And as usual, I think even though Jim wasn't there, he was at his son's wedding that Saturday, it still went off without a glitch. So the staff did a great job and appreciate all their efforts in pulling off Brentwood Days. I know the residents greatly appreciate it. I have a couple other announcements. Coming up on November the 10th from 9 o'clock till 1, we will have a document shredding service. This is something the city does a couple times a year. It will be held at Shred and Protect down in Hanley Industrial Court. That's open to residents that would like to take any kind of financial documents or whatever they want shredded. They can take it there and drop it off, and they'll be shredded by a professional company. Some people have concerns about putting those kinds of things in their regular recycler trash. So that will be, again, November the 10th, 9 till 1, and that's at 1429 Strassner in Hanley Industrial Court. Continuing with recycling, on October the 13th, we will actually have an electronic recycling event down at Norm West Park. That'll be from 9 o'clock till 2, and any residents that have any old electronic equipments, TVs or radios or any of those types of things that they would like to get rid of, they can take it down there, and there'll be no charge for dropping off those electronic events. So again, that'll be on October the 13th from 9 till 2 down at Norm West Park. And then one last item that is, I think, very important for the residents, and I hope that people can attend, but the city will be holding a series of stakeholder meetings to talk about flood mitigation along Brentwood or Manchester. The city has engaged an engineering firm to conduct this study, which will ultimately help determine what kind of mitigation and improvements we can make to that corridor on Manchester down from basically Mary Avenue east to almost Hanley Road. The stakeholder meeting, the first one will be at the Brentwood Community Center on November 19th, and all the meetings are open to the public. You don't have to be a resident of Ward 3. You don't have to be a resident of Brentwood, but people's input will be greatly appreciated. And then, let me see, the first meeting is directed towards regulations and initiative, and stakeholders are all invited to come. Let me see.
Starts at 2:30.
Starts at 2:30 and goes till 3:30 on the 19th. So that is during the day.
Any chance of changing that time to make it more
Well, again,
user-friendly?
There are 3 different meetings.
They're multiple.
there's multiple. I'm getting there. The reason is because we're dealing with other entities such as the Corps of Engineers and MSD, and so their representatives come. The second meeting is directed towards Manchester Road property owners and businesses located along the corridor. That'll be from 4 to 5 p.m. And then the third meeting will be directed towards the elected officials and appointed city officials. The Redevelopment Corporation, which is handling this initiative, will be from 5:30 till 6:30 on that same day. So there's actually 3 phases to the meeting. This is posted on the website, or will be.
It will be.
And so,
Postcards
again,
will be sent.
it'd be great to have input and show the importance of trying to get something done down there. So, okay. I think that's all I have under my report. Public Safety Committee, anything further? Actually not present. Public Works Committee?
No report, Your Honor. We do have a meeting coming up where we will be meeting at the inline skating rink to look at the trails that we've just discussed.
Okay, thank you. Next item, Director of Planning is not present, but we have 2 special use permits for approval for the board tonight. One is for True Running, which will be opening up the 10th of October.
11th.
Now it's 11th? He told me the day 10th.
Its starting date is October, well, according to this application.
grand opening.
The starting date.
I think the
is
10th is for the 11th. I
Okay.
think the first day of the night. Okay.
Their
that's
sign
fine.
on the storefront says 10.
Yeah.
10th.
They're having a pre-opening on the 9th, and then the actual store opening is on the 10th. Okay. And so this application is for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's for a temporary installation of a 40 by 40 foot tent for community group involvement. There will be no sales during the grand opening celebration. They will have their employees park in the south lot of the St. Louis Galleria, and then they will shuttle them to Brentwood Square. This tent will take up 8 parking spaces. They've also received additional permission to park at the Magna parking garage. There will be nonprofits that host races in the tent, and then there will be vendors that will be giving shoes and clothing away.
Okay. So, if I get a motion to approve the conditional use, or special use permit for the tent for True Runner.
So moved, Your
I'll
Honor.
make the motion.
And second. Motion is made by Alderman Robertson, second by Alderman Toohey. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Next one is a special use permit for PetSmart.
This is an adoption event on the parking lot in front of PetSmart location. It will be for the 3 Saturdays in October from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th.
Okay. Didn't we just approve something?
They've been holding more and more of these events,
This is for
and
additional
they tend to be
events coming up.
successful for them, I presume.
Okay. Any, I have a motion?
Motion to approve the special use permit.
And second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Just out of curiosity, do we have a limit on how many special use permits?
No, before, they were just holding them, but staff sent a letter
Right.
requesting that they process this application through us, so I'm not aware that there's a limit.
I know it's some sign permits, we have limits. I was just curious.
I think it was.
Yeah, okay.
3 per year. Your Honor, quick
Oh,
question.
Sure.
So Bola, on the True Runner, that they are going to have races in the tent?
No.
That's a short race.
Sign me up.
Yeah, just a clarification. No, okay.
The nonprofits
I'm with you.
host races
And they'll be
throughout the year.
advertising them there.
Exactly.
Gotcha. I could win that race.
Especially out of the starting point.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Okay, Ways and Means?
Yes, Your Honor, we have 2 meetings coming up in the month of October for our budget proceedings. Bola, do you have the dates on those meetings? What is it, the 17th and 29th?
Correct.
And then we'll be moving briskly into other very important topics immediately after that.
Okay. City Attorney?
No report, Your Honor.
City Clerk Administrator?
No report.
Excise Commissioner? Mr. Clemens?
We have before us this evening a request for a temporary liquor license by a company known as Immerse by Atlas. They're having an open house on November the 7th from 4 to 8, and they're asking for a permit to serve beer, wine, and alcohol by drink only.
Okay. Any questions? Motion to approve the temporary liquor license?
So moved, Your Honor.
In second?
I'll second that, Your Honor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
I just want to add one comment, Mayor. I applaud you for the sewer lateral program. I wish it was in effect 20 years ago because it cost me $600 to $800 to get it fixed.
20 years ago.
Sorry, we don't do reimbursements, George.
Too late.
Library isn't present. Municipal League, no updates. Communication? Communications? Nope. Historical
No report,
Society?
Your Honor, sorry.
No closed meeting. All right. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Alderman Lady?
Love to announce that the Ward 3 meeting for the month of October is the 30th of October, day before Halloween. Watch for the little kids. 7 p.m. up here at the City Hall. All are invited.
Okay. Alderman
And-
Kramer? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Oh, no.
No, ladies first. Go right ahead.
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we go ahead and do a compensation survey. We've discussed it enough, and I didn't realize that I wasn't doing it at Ways and Means, so I'll go ahead and make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. And all in favor? Or let's do a roll call.
Can we have discussion?
Well, I think it really should go to Ways and Means to discuss what the parameters of it want to be. And I'm hoping that, again, maybe some of these surveys, if the other municipalities are willing to give them up to us, you might not need to do one. But I would actually ask that you take back your second and discuss that at Ways and Means to see. Because, again, it really comes down to the parameter that you want to, and that's why they can be very expensive, or as one resident wanted to point out, they can be $2,000. But you want to make sure that you're comparing the job descriptions, all those kinds of things. So, but I would take that back to Ways and Means for discussion, if you don't mind. Okay, is that okay? Or
Yeah.
Okay,
That's fine.
all right. So you take back your first and
I
second.
take back mine.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Other new business?
Can we
Yes.
put that on the agenda, though? I mean,
Yes.
quickly, though. I know we have to discuss it quickly because of the budget, but,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And that's a topic we can chat about briefly before the meeting to find out what the goals are, for example.
We have documents that I've been able to pull that explains what a compensation is and what it entails. So
Survey.
it won't be the first item on the agenda, but we'll put it on the agenda for Ways and Means.
And perhaps by that time, too, if we can get some information from other cities, that if it's possible, that would be great. But I know you're busy with the budget, too, so if not, that's fine, too.
Yeah, I think they're looking into that already.
Your Honor, I would just add to that topic, in the past, those compensation or salary surveys have been done by request on a case-by-case basis whenever we were hiring or fielding a certain position, and it was just for that position with the context of the other municipalities that have a similar position or revenue or population share as us. So we have done them in the past, but they've been for individual positions only, not citywide. Your Honor, I had a couple items. One is the answer to one of the residents. Karen Smith brought up the topic of the Brentwood Forest Reserve. Karen, are you still here? There you are. Hello there. I moved into Brentwood Forest in 1994. I served on the board for I think it was 8 different years, and I came to know Brentwood Forest not only as my home, but an area of the city that I've come to be very proud of. And one of the reasons why is we have a very particular strategic methodology that we use for calculating our reserve. We actually hire a company called the Reserve Advisors Group. And by the way, I did go through this detail at the last Ways and Means Committee meeting, which some of this may be in the minutes if you get a chance to take a look whenever they're approved. So we hire this group called the Reserve Advisors Study Group. We've used them for a number of years, and what they do is they analyze the capital items or those items within a entity. I consider Brentwood Forest to be kind of a small microcosm of a city. We have a lake and fish. Probably shouldn't eat, but it's we've got all the amenities that some cities may have. At any rate, the reserve amount is calculated based upon items that need to be funded. Majority of those are capital items that have lifespans. For example, swimming pools, roofs, siding, concrete work, and the like. So we go through on a case-by-case basis and provide information to this Reserve Advisors Study entity that, in consultation with our management, interviews are taken, a lot of analysis is done, and they make a recommendation back to the board. We recommend this year and for the next few years that your reserve contribution be X, and here's why. And they go through and itemize why they arrived at those situations. It is different than a city in many regards in that the city is much more complex. Taxing entities, expenditures, revenues, there's a lot more to the picture with a city. But in general, that's how Brentwood Forest operates. Currently, we have, at any given time, over $1 million on reserve, up to $1.4 million, $1.4 million, which is a nice amount. And there is part of that reserve that one could say is earmarked for projects that are coming out. It's not exactly an unrestricted reserve, but that's the process that we follow, and a lot of the residents that live there and the Board of Managers members feel comfortable knowing that that's the process that's followed and that's how we get there. Can we do something like that similar with the city? It's possible we could borrow pieces and parts. For a long time, things were perhaps done with not the same type of structure as what I've just itemized. Perhaps we can add some of that different type of structure or analysis or strategy going forward. We'll see. I promise that with the help of the other Ways and Means Committee members and our staff, that we will definitely be taking a very close, scrutinized look at all topics and doing things in the best avenue that is beneficial for the city, its residents, and the liquidity of our revenues going forward. So I hope that answers that question. And then, Frank, I wanted to go to a topic that has come up more than one meeting time. If you could offer an opine on this topic. It's the topic of minutes. This comes up not only committee levels and has for years, aldermanic level for years, and we have two avenues that we can go down, and it seems like we fluctuate between the two. One is changing what was meant to be said from what is printed in the minutes, or correcting what was said if it was an error in the minutes. There are two different things that are happening here. Are we allowed to correct things if we didn't mean to say it that way, but it's not an error, or is that not proper?
No, you should not correct things you didn't mean to say because it's a record of what was said.
Okay.
The correction is to correct errors made in the reporting of what was said.
Okay. And so that's important. So we have, in certain cases, we have the meeting, and then we have the transcription of those minutes. And sometimes, every once in a while, just like with a text, we send texts or emails all day long, and the tone or the, I guess, the context isn't always clear, depending on the interpretation. Interpretation is really big when it comes to minutes. So I think what you're saying is that if we have a change to make to, for example, the Board of Alderman minutes, that it is to correct an error in what was reported as being said versus correcting something that is not what we wanted to say.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Alderman Harper has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Harper.
Just following up on that, so if a meeting is audio recorded, should we have a full transcription of that audio recording?
State law does not require a full transcription. It only requires that there be minutes of the meeting and cover certain bare minimum things such as a record of the vote of the alderman on various matters. Certainly you can become as detailed or as general as you want. I'm not aware of any other cities, and I certainly haven't checked, that actually hire a court stenographer to do a transcription, but certainly there are CDs, or we've got DVDs of the recorded meetings.
And if we're at a committee meeting and it's being audio recorded, someone can request that audio recording as part of Sunshine?
Sure.
Okay.
As long as it's not an executive session.
So we keep that recording indefinitely then?
I don't know what the city's policy is on those recordings.
But we can research that.
And actually, I think that's something the board just needs to decide what they want to do. Whether you want to have recordings and at the subcommittee levels, really, again, no full action of the city can be taken at the subcommittee level. What the subcommittees do is they discuss, public works issues, public safety issues, or financial issues. The committee then takes a vote to bring something to the full board for passage. And then, now everything here, again, we don't do it word for word in the minutes, but it's all recorded on TV, and that we do keep indefinitely. You kind of get into, spending staff time if we're going to be, again, at the subcommittee level, it's very, takes up a lot of time in order to produce the minutes, exactly like we do for the Board of Alderman meetings from the subcommittee meetings. And I think maybe we as a board need to decide, maybe I would just ask that maybe we think about that and maybe bring that up as a topic at the next meeting, what we want to do as a board when it comes to minutes for subcommittee. And then, again, I think Board of Alderman, we're pretty consistent in what we do, but I think it just it's going to be overwhelming for staff if we want to have recorded minutes and then almost word for word kind of minutes from our subcommittee meetings. It just it's very time consuming to produce those. So, again, I would just ask the board to kind of think about how we want to do that going forward. So, Alderman Lay.
If I may, in my packet, there was a redefinition of the 4 wards.
That goes with the code.
This is going into the code, the drafted code book at present.
Yes.
All right, because this does not agree with what we have by ordinance right now.
It won't.
Yeah, to work with. So
Alderman Kramer asked us to make a change after it was adopted, was it earlier this year, to include, was it Bobolink and sections of O.B. Clark. So that should be the change to it.
okay.
This was approved by the board earlier this year.
Is that when we did the redistricting, when
Exactly.
Harrison moved
Right,
over to
right.
Andy's ward and so
Right.
forth, and we had to have that to the state or the county by a certain date?
Right.
Yeah. I wasn't on the board then, but I remember.
So what you're looking at then is these changes, when and if we approve the draft code, become the new official boundary lines
Correct.
to work with.
Yes.
You're not looking to put it into an ordinance form to pass it on its own?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Okay. Okay, I'll open it back up to public comment if anybody'd like to address the board.
Susan Ryan, 9324 Pine Avenue. I would like to ask if you can look into an expanded definition for fraud on the policy. One that may include, I'm reading something, it says fraud generally includes intentional misrepresentation of material fact, material existing fact for personal gain, and not adhering to one's duty as defined by the code, and such that disclosure would constitute dismissal, may be an issue. That can be fraud. It can be breach of confidence. What I'd like to read is, fraud may also be an omission or purposeful failure to state material facts when non-disclosure makes other statements misleading. I would like there to be some effort in looking into that as being part of fraud and versus just embezzlement. But for those people who have specific jobs where their responsibilities to the citizens, if they do not share appropriate information, can lead to damage. Thank you.
Okay.
Chris Kobler. I live on Henrietta, and it's Kobler, in case anyone gets confused. I didn't come before the board to complain at Ebola. I apologize if you felt that my comments were directed at you. They were directed at the board. I think I've been at several of these meetings over the last few months. I was at a meeting where you did not vote to purchase a car that cost $38,000 because the car was no longer available. If I'm remembering that incorrectly, I apologize, but that was discussed during one of the meetings as well. And at that point, the budget, I believe, that was the meeting where you voted to buy the trash trucks.
Mm-hmm. Yes, bids.
And at one point, that amount was listed that you could go up to $40,000. That was what was said at that meeting. That's where I got my information. I think that's a poor choice. I apologize, Bola. That's my personal feeling. I don't think that it's a good expenditure of the city's money. I believe that there's a policy in place that there's not to be any smoking in the city cars. So enforce the policy, and then that won't be an issue. I don't know what your contract is. That's not my place at this point. And I don't have a problem with the city providing you a car. I have a problem with the city providing an expensive car for your use while you're in the city. I don't see any reason why it can't be a pool car. That's my personal opinion, and I'm entitled to that as a citizen of the city of Brentwood. If you feel like we're coming and complaining, I apologize for that too. We are. You're not listening to what we want you to do, and we'll continue to keep coming and complaining until you start listening. Having said that, I am very excited. I was on the website this afternoon. I'd like to know where to find the audit because I couldn't find it on the website. So I'd like to know where to find that. But I was very excited to see that we were doing an electronics recycling because I have several computers, a scanner, and a couple old printers, and lots of cords I don't know what to do with. And I want someplace very reasonably to get rid of that, and I appreciate you doing that. So with all the complaining that I do, I figure every once in a while when you give me something to be complimentary about, I would like to do that as well. I am going to be back. You will see my face quite a bit, and when I feel it's necessary, I will complain. So be ready to hear me some more. Thank you.
And I will tell you with the electronic recycling, if you mistakenly put it in your trash, you will find it by the curb when you come home. And you can take that from...
On the list, it did say that you could only have one television per car, so don't try to bring more than one. I do have two, but I won't bring more than one.
Take two cars. Oh, I already thought of that, didn't you?
I'll help you out. That's kind of funny.
One more.
Anyway, I wanted to thank Olivia because I read the minutes and I have read prior
Octavia.
minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. I was
That's
thinking of somebody else. Anyway, I read the minutes. I thought they were incredibly professionally well done. I thought that one thing that I noted was complained, and I was certain that you would say stated, but I thought that they were very well done, and they represented the conversation that happened at this board, as well as the comments were, comments were very evenly represented, and I thought that you did a great job. So I'm going to let you know. Octavia.
Thank you. Thank you. A motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Oh, one more.
See, Bola mentioned, in addition to Lee Wynn not being present, that more time was needed for research into this Christie Mayer civil lawsuit. I was wondering who's doing the research and how long will that take? Can you give me
Well,
any
we'll
answers
discuss
to
that in
that?
executive session at our next meeting.
Okay, no answers?
Motion to adjourn, Your Honor.
And a second.
Second,
Go to dinner.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, we are adjourned.